A warm and friendly hello. Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the Beeson family of podcasts. This is a finished up and always polished podcast. Might be noticing in the background there's a little bit of construction. That is not mine. I live in a condo, and I think the person downstairs is dealing with that, but you know what? We venture on regardless. It just makes us sound more hardworking, as in segment number 2, we are going to be joined by Mike Randle. He is one of the hardest workers in all of college basketball. He's going to be joining me, and we're going to be taking a look at a little bit of what we've gotten out of the SEC recently with some of those bad losses. I'm going to consider a little bit of something with him as well. I'm going to throw out there the idea of maybe we should be tossing out a team's best and absolute worst performances and looking at everything in the middle, because something I've noticed in college basketball is that it feels like every single team has had like one big giant clunker thus far this season. So that's something that I'm going to be throwing at him. We're going to be taking a look at a few games for Wednesday and some teams that have not impressed him thus far this season. So gonna have a fun chat in segment number 2. In the final segment, gonna get you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Wednesday as we hit some bank shots. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at Jade_41. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Did not get in any Twitter/X questions, and I will once again remind you that because of the Greg Peterson experience on VSiN Sports Betting Network, do have to record this in a little bit of advance. I'm recording this right around 10 o'clock p.m. Eastern, so we still have the second half of like UConn versus North Carolina to come. Not able to recap things like Montana State versus Washington, if anything crazy happens there. So I'm going to have a little bit of cleanup with regards to recap on the podcast tomorrow. But let's take a look at everything that we got from a very lively college basketball Tuesday. Try to find some trends and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
From Madison Square Garden, it was Illinois who put on a show 98-89. They take down Florida Atlantic. And by the way, this Florida Atlantic team that was a top 40 team in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis last year. Certainly not looking that thus far this season. And Illinois actually entered into this game second in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Certainly met a little bit more competition here, but for Florida Atlantic, they were able to have John L. Davis go off for a nice game, 19 points, and Vladislav Golden was able to do his part in terms of scoring, but you needed a little bit more on the glass from him as he only had 4 rebounds in this one. Illinois actually loses the rebound battle by kind of 28-26, but where Illinois won was having Marcus Domask lend TJ Shannon some support. TJ Shannon has really been that primary scorer for Illinois this year. He had 33 points, but Domask, 33 points, 6 boards of his own. These two guys combined to go 25 of 35 from the floor as Illinois shot 63% from the field, 8 of 20 from three-point range. That was a big difference in this game as for Florida Atlantic, they also had 13 turnovers to Illinois' 14, so they won a lot of the battles that are a little bit more small, but for Illinois, they were just incredibly out from the floor, running great offense, and they get it done. Also in the Big Ten getting it done, Wisconsin. They go on the road and they take down Michigan State 70-57. A Michigan State team that was third in the country in terms of overall three-point shooting percentage a season ago continues to be cold, 6 of 19 from distance. Meanwhile, for Wisconsin, how about Stephen Krull, the 7-footer, going 4 of 4 from distance with 18 points, while AJ Storr, I've been saying on this podcast, this guy was going to rise up in terms of his three-point shooting. 4 of 6 from the outside. You were able to get 10 points off the bench as well from John Blackwell. That was some unexpected production. And for Wisconsin, this team has been able to do a very nice job on the glass. They completely plowed on the glass, 36-22. Mady Sissoko just completely ineffective in this one. He was in foul trouble, and that caused the team to have to go a little bit more to Colin Carr and company. And off the bench, guys were able to be relatively solid. And Ty Walker at 22 points, but just not a lot of support around him. So a big win there. And for Tennessee, things have been on the fritz a little bit more for this team, and they don't look quite like the same defense that they've been in past years, but they had a nice offensive expose against George Mason, 87-66. Tennessee is able to get it done. As for Tennessee, you had 17 points, 8 boards out of Jonas Adu, but it was really a nice team effort in this one. They had just 9 turnovers to George Mason's 14, and for old George, you were able to get 15 points out of Darius Maddox, as George Mason actually did shoot 11 of 25 from three-point range. Tennessee was a top team in all of college basketball in terms of opponent's three-point shooting percentage seasons ago. That seems to be acting up a little bit, but all in all, solid win for Tennessee, a team in which was able to get just a little bit of everything from so many of their players to be able to execute in that one. Kansas, they executed the win, but if you laid a big giant number with them, you did not get there. 88-69. Kansas, they get a win going 8 of 20 from three-point range with Kevin McCullough doing a nice job leading the way with 25 points. Another nice double-double out of Hunter Dickinson, but question remains with Kansas. What are you going to be able to get off the bench out of guys like Johnny Furphy and company? Furphy had a nice quality performance, 10 points. He was able to go 2 of 4 from three-point range, so that is something that you do like to see. And for UMKC, they were able to get a cover because you were able to get 18 points apiece out of Christian Corsalt and Cameron Foss. Foss comes in from the non-D1 ranks, and he's been able to do a relatively solid job for a UMKC team that I'm going to call what it is. Don't necessarily have high expectations for them, but that was a quality cover for them, and this was a quality win for Oklahoma. 72-51. They take it to Providence, and it's an Oklahoma bunch that, well, they did not cover that harebrained spread against Arkansas Pine Bluff, and I believe that game against UT Rio Grande Valley, the spread got away from them a little bit as well. This is a team that's right around about 6-2 against the spread. They've really been able to surprise it. I was expecting more out of this guy to begin the season, and he finally rose up in this game. Milos Uzan, 17 points, 12 rebounds, I think could be a real difference maker for Oklahoma. Would like to see Oklahoma cut down on the 15 turnovers, but they did a tremendous job on glass, winning that battle 40-23. As for Providence, one offensive rebound in 40 minutes of basketball, and it's not like they shot it amazing. They were 5 of 23 from three-point range. Devin Carter went 4 of 9 from 3, and that means the rest of the team was 1 of 14 from distance, so a little bit disjointed for Providence. They, too, had 15 turnovers in this one. I'm doing this at the half of North Carolina versus UConn. It's currently 44-39 with North Carolina being able to get some relatively solid offense. They went 14 of 27 from the floor in the first half. Armando Bacot, along with Harrison Ingram, were both able to give you 11 points. And for Alex Garaban, a little bit cold from the floor, but it's able to give the team 6 rebounds. And Donovan Klingen picked up 2 fouls in the first half, so we shall see how that one progresses. And I'll need to clean up on the podcast tomorrow what we all see in terms of Grand Canyon versus San Diego State. As San Diego State currently trailing at the half 35-28, and this has just not been the same San Diego State team thus far this season. Feels like they're playing a little bit too fast for their own good. They lost a rebound battle 24-18 in that first half, so we shall see what we get out of them moving forward. What we saw in the Big East versus Big 12 challenge was a nice overtime win out of Kansas State, 72-71, and if you took the under in this game, you got there despite overtime. A much-deserved win for the under, but for Kansas State, Arthur Kaluma, the hero in this one, he comes up with 26 big points, 10 of 13 from the floor, plays 44 minutes in this game. Really a coming out party for him. He did have 5 turnovers in this game, but love to see that. And for Villanova, defense looked a little bit better in this one, but you tell that the offense is still a bit janky. 11 of 31 from three-point range. Yeah, Justin Moore give you just 3 points in 8 minutes. I believe that he went down with a little bit of an injury. I would need to double check as I was just looking very briefly at that game, but I'm going to be certainly updating that on the podcast tomorrow when we know a little bit more on the Justin Moore front, but that did cost Hakeem Hart along Jordan Longino to coming off the bench, and while they combined for 26 points, they went just 9 of 24 from the floor, and that was a little bit costly for Villanova in this one. Also a little bit costly is if you laid the points with Boston College, as that is one of the worst beats that you're going to find this year, kids. 82-68. Boston College was laying on the closing line between about 15 to 16, and this game looked like it was completely salted away for Boston College. They're up 28 points with 3 minutes and 30 seconds remaining, and then they give up just a remarkable 14-0 run to Central Connecticut to end the game. So that was really rough, including the last shot of the game not going the way of Boston College, because Central Connecticut, they took a 3 with about 28 seconds remaining. Boston College did not let their walk-ons take any sort of a 3. So feel for you there. Notre Dame, they were able to get a nice win over Western Michigan, 86-65. As for Notre Dame, nice sign of offensive life for this team. 9 of 22 from three-point range. They shoot about 59% from the floor. And a nice double-double, 19 points, 10 rebounds out of Tay Davis. Certainly still a work in progress, but was a nice night overall for the ACC. The one team that really did slip up was Georgia Tech, unable to piggyback off of prosperity. They lose to Georgia by kind of 76-62. As for Georgia Tech, they go just 8 of 27 from three-point range. You had Kawasi Reeves, Miles Kelly, both give you 12 points in this one. And for Georgia, They go just 10 of 33 from three-point range, but they win the rebound battle 50-43. You had Georgia be able to get 16 big points out of Noah Thomason, so he was able to do a nice job there. And for Russell Chewa, the 9 rebounds that he was able to put in, pretty massive as well. What else is massive is we're now on our DK Network grade of picks 18-13 this year. Laid the number with Virginia, and Virginia gets it done 77-47. They run NC Central off the gym for Virginia. They actually don't force a lot of turnovers. That had really been a hallmark for them earlier in the season, but they win the turnover battle regardless. 9 turnovers for NC Central to their 5 for Virginia. They go 9 of 21 from 3 with Isaac McNeely being the reason why you were able to get the cover no matter if you bet this early or late. 22 points on 6 of 8 3-point shooting. Off the bench, you also had Elijah Gertrude. That sounds like a really old name. He was able to put in there 13 points, and then you had 14 points, 9 rebounds out of Leon Bond III. So Virginia showing a little bit of depth, and Syracuse getting a nice win over Cornell, 81-70. A little bit of a lower scoring game than expected as Cornell 9 of 33 from 3, and for Syracuse, Judah Mintz has been a little bit hot and cold, but when he's hot, he's hot. 5 of 7 from 3, 28 big points out of him. Malik Brown off the bench did not have a single point, but was able to pull in there 11 rebounds. So a very quality showing there. And then if you're looking a little bit more at the mid-major ranks as well, you were able to see a nice win out of Delaware, which Xavier now loses as a double-digit home favorite for the second time in 7 days. 87-80. Delaware gets it done. Jalon Trent, who comes in from North Dakota, he had a massive game, 27 points, 6 assists, 7 rebounds. The Xavier defense is a sieve, and they couldn't even overcome that with 8 of 16 3-point shooting. Quincy Oliveri, 34 big points. He looked rock solid in this game, but for Xavier, 17 turnovers to the 8 of Delaware. Xavier is now 4-5 on the season. It's been a little bit of rough sledding for them, but what has not been rough sledding is if you've been backing Princeton. They are now 9-0, another quality cover for them. They take down Old Drexel by a count of 81-70. For Princeton, they have covered all but 2 of their games thus far this season, so 7-2 against the spread. They have been a big money maker, and Mississippi State fading them has been a little bit of a money maker, 74-39. They completely pistol whipped Mississippi Valley State in that one, so high quality performance there. And hey, Navy was able to break 70. Their game against George Washington went to overtime, 79-77. George Washington able to prevail. They're unable to get the cover though. Merrimack was able to get a cover against Florida, 77-57 was the final in that one as well. And also of significance, take a look at this Indiana State team and what they're doing as well. 90-67. They completely pummel Northern Illinois. For Indiana State, they go 11 of 27 from 3-point range, 13 of 13 at the free throw line. Isaac Swope, the transfer from Southern Indiana, 27 points, 10 rebounds, and Northern Illinois has been a nice story as well. They've really been able to build themselves up, but you just take a look at what this Indiana State team is doing right now, and I believe that they have now covered every one of their games except for that game against Alabama, and they might not have covered that game against Toledo as well. I think that was more of a 4-point spread, so Indiana State has covered all but 2 of their games thus far this season, so they've been a highly profitable team, and what has been highly profitable recently has been backing these home underdogs. If you take a look at the last 7 days in college basketball, home underdogs 35-25 against the spread with quite a few results pending for Tuesday. That's a 58.3% hit rate. Meanwhile, in the last 7 days, the totals have really ironed out as well. 139 overs, so 138 unders, about as 50-50 as it gets. Meanwhile, overall for the season, you're still staring at overs, sitting at about 51.7% clip, 678 overs, 633 unders with home underdogs. Overall for the season, 149, 145, and 6 against the spread, and favorites overall hitting at 50.7%, 661, 642, and 16 against the spread. So that's what we all saw in college basketball on Tuesday, and that's what we're getting trend-wise in college basketball. Coming up next, let's take a look at that home underdog trend a little bit with our good friend Mike Randle. Let's also dive in on some interstate rivalry games, as we're going to have one of those in Clemson versus South Carolina. Gets his thoughts on really this Wednesday slate, a few teams that he's bullish and bearish on as well, and just have some general fun with old Mike. Up next right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hughes Peterson, now a part of the Mason Family Podcast.
Sports Betting Innovative Analytics has taken the guesswork and emotion out of sports betting to bring you an innovative and trustworthy resource to enhance your journey to becoming a winning player. With industry-leading money-back guarantee options backed by their sophisticated modeling, They want to introduce you to a system that's not widely seen or available to help you beat the bookmaker. Specializing in NBA, college basketball, and WNBA, your first week is always free. Get started at SBIA1.com today.
And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Seats with myself, Greg Gibbs Peterson, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. It is always great to be joined by this man as Mike Randle. He does great work over at the FTN Network and FTN Bets as one of their main content officers. He does an absolutely incredible job with college basketball. But for those of you that are fans of the NFL, he does a great job on the fantasy and the DFS side over there as well, taking a look at some player props. He does a great job on so many fronts with regards to FTN and FTN Bets. He also does his own podcast, the Screen the Screener podcast, which you're able to find wherever you get this fine podcast. And to be able to follow Mike on Twitter/X, that is at his last name, Randle, and the word rant all together. And Mike, great to have you aboard. Thank you.
Oh, great. Great to be back, man. Just came in from watching Purdue just get out to a scalding hot start here against Iowa, which they needed after losing that rough game at Northwestern, but a lot of fun.
And you mentioned that game from Monday, and just what have you taken a look at in terms of college basketball? Because I think the one theme that we've got right now is that there isn't a single team that has been completely dominant in every single game, because we saw Florida Atlantic have their slip up against Bryant. We're doing this as we don't know how their game for Tuesday went, but we saw that little bit of a fumble. Creighton, who is a team I'm very much in on, they had that clunker against Colorado State. Certainly had Purdue have a little bit of a stumble against Northwestern. You're able to go down the list, and I feel like that's just how it is in college basketball. And I do think that when it comes to, because we always do this in like school, you've got like mean, median, and mode, where when it comes to statistics, sometimes you throw out the absolute best result and you also throw out the absolute worst result. We might need to do that this year because we're seeing a little bit more variance than I can remember.
Yeah, a lot of variance, but I like to caution everyone, and I fell into this trap myself, but I've learned teams are going to go through bad streaks. How about Connecticut last year, Greg, when they lost 5 of 6? They lost away to Xavier and Providence, away to Marquette, then they came home to St. John's and lost, then away at Seton Hall. I mean, at that point, they were 4-5 in the Big East, and no one would have thought on Wednesday, January 18th, they were going to go on the run that they did. And also, Auburn, when they made the run all the way to the Final Four, they lost 3 games in a row. So teams are going to go through these streaks, and I think we find some good future value in teams that we know are talented, but maybe are on the wrong side of some coin flip decisions.
Yep, I do think that that is something that you always want to take a look at as well, and you're able to just find better value in general with these teams right after one really rough performance as well, like a school that I like in Charleston. They started out like 21 of 117 or something like that from three-point range. We've seen them rebound a little bit, though. Do want to be checking in on that Rain Smith injury as well, but I do think that there's a lot of value with that. And something else that there's been a lot of value with, we're doing this as we don't know the results for Tuesday, and quite frankly, Monday we didn't have a lot of this, but home underdogs. Last week or so, home underdogs have been hitting at a 58% clip. I can tell you right now, with my handicapping, I am not at all surprised about that. But how much do you look at home underdogs this time of year? Because now we are getting out of those like stray 1 or 2 conference games in the Big Ten, the Metro Atlantic, what have you. And I just think that these home underdogs, when it comes to conference play, they just hold more and more value as things go along.
Yeah, they certainly do. And I've seen that home underdogs have been very live, specifically those between 3 and 7 points at home. I used information from Bet Labs, and they're actually covering, if you just look at the numbers, from 3 to 7 points in terms of getting that at home, they are covering at a 62% clip this year. So really you have to look at each situation and analyze it. There are some teams, though, rivalries where I've seen the other team have been able to pop up, even if they're favored. So, teams like Bradley at home, favored by 2 against Indiana State. Indiana State was dominant in that game. But you really have to watch and look at each case specifically. But I will tell you, I do draw pause when I see a team getting points at home. That is the one that I have to be very careful of, because I think that you can really have, especially early on in conference play where no one's been eliminated, we've seen situations where teams have played very well. Look at Northwestern. Again, Purdue on the road, favorite. Northwestern shoots the lights out from 3. Purdue is a very good defensive team from 3-point range, but you really have to be a very special team. It has to be the right matchup for a team to cover on the road, specifically in an early conference game.
Yep, absolutely. And I do think that that's such good words of wisdom there, because you do want to be gauging it situation by situation. But certainly over the weekend, we saw a lot of those home underdogs be lively. Heck, Appalachian State being able to get that outright win against Auburn. That was a very good case in point there, as well as Mike Randle does tremendous work over at FTN, and FTN Bets is joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And speaking of the SEC, I'm sure that you'd agree with me. It wasn't necessarily the greatest weekend for the SEC, and we're actually going to be seeing the biggest upstart in the SEC going at it on Wednesday in South Carolina versus Clemson. Now, with South Carolina, it's not necessarily like they've been playing the monsters of the Midway. They haven't had a schedule where they've been playing like Duke and your Blue Bloods or anything like that, but they're off to a 7-0 start, and in a SEC in which we just saw Auburn lose to Appalachian State. We just saw Kentucky lose as a north of 15-point favorite. We just saw Mississippi State lose to Southern as north of a 15-point favorite. I think that this could be a really big statement game for them on Wednesday against a Clemson team, and once again, an interstate rivalry.
Yeah, rivalry game, and now they're going to go on the road, and they're going to play at Clemson. Both teams are shooting very well from three-point range. Clemson shooting 40.7%, South Carolina 40.2%. Lamont Paris, always a great defensive coach, locks down inside the arc. So I think this is a very close game. I'm going to put the spread somewhere around, 7, 8, somewhere in there. I am probably on the underdog here. Listen, Brad Brommel, he's been hot, cold. He's always on the hot seat there. Has certainly done a nice job. Road win at Alabama was great. Road win at Pittsburgh. But coming back here, I would suspect, Greg, that the majority of bets would be on a hot Clemson team. Rivalry game on the road. A lot of points. Good defensive team with Lamont Paris guiding the Gamecocks there. I'm leaning to take the points. Have to see how the numbers turn out here. But Clemson, not a team that's going to turn you over a lot. So that's another thing. I don't have to worry about turnovers in this matchup. I kind of lean South Carolina right now.
Yep, I do think so as well. I do think that with South Carolina, you're going to need to get some points. I wouldn't be willing to take them like outright on the money line or anything like that. But if you get a pretty appropriate number, I'd be right with you as well. And how much do you take a look at this Clemson team and question how they're going to be able to just piggyback off of prosperity, for lack of a better term? Because with Clemson, you mentioned it, they go on the road and they knock off Alabama. And what I thought was honestly a little bit more impressive was after that, they were in a relative pick'em game against Pittsburgh, a Pittsburgh team that's getting a little bit exposed for playing a weak non-conference schedule prior to that game, but they go on the road, they get that win. I think that that's really the mark of a good team, to be able to come off of a win like going on the road and knock off Alabama and preventing that letdown against a team like Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I think we have to decide. There are some teams like Clemson, we have to figure out where we stand with them. Remember, Clemson last year, no one believed in Clemson. No one picked them to do well in the ACC. They were 15-3. They're 7-0, coming off a home win over Duke. After that, the wheels fall off. Later in the year, they go on a 3-game losing, I think 4 or 5, including away at Louisville by 10, just inexcusable. However, this year, again, very underrated. You beat Alabama and Pittsburgh back-to-back, and they beat UAB on a neutral. Those are pretty good quality wins. Now, they're going to get tested here. South Carolina, TCU, and a Memphis team, Greg, that I really like this year. That is going to be difficult. They have Radford at home. That's not easy. But I think, again, they're going to be underestimated coming into the ACC. But look, why can't they make a run in an ACC where Duke has already lost back-to-back games to Arkansas and then lost at Georgia Tech? So I think they're right there. They're a veteran team. They play well. Brommel wants this year very badly because he's always on the hot seat, and they are shooting well from three-point range, and they are not turning the ball over. So add all those things up in an ACC that maybe North Carolina, Duke aren't really where people think they are. I think they can make a run, but I want to see it. I have a little bit of apprehension like you do, but I'm higher on them this year than I was last year.
Yep, I feel cautiously optimistic about them. And the one thing that I can certainly say about Clemson is PJ Hall, one of the more special players in all of college basketball. I love the way that he's able to light it up. If they can have more of the ancillary pieces, if they can continue to have the backcourt shoot it from three-point range like they are, which I think we're going to see a little bit of a die down from north of 41% three-point shooting. But if they're able to just have those guards, protect the ball, maybe get a little bit more out of Jack Clark, I'm with you. I think that this is a team that has a lot of upside, and this podcast always has lots of upside. When we've got this man aboard, Mike Randle, who does great work over at FTN Bets, joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops. And the big game that we're going to be seeing for Wednesday, in my opinion, is this Marquette versus Texas game. It's a reunion of Shaka Smart. Now, we are doing this as we don't have any numbers up on this game, but I think that the spread is going to be very, very tight. You have to lean with the home team probably being a slight favorite here, but that said, how do you take a look at a matchup that certainly is going to be involving no love lost, with Shaka Smart being over at Texas a few seasons ago, and both of these teams just having very unique styles, and a Texas team that I feel like they're finding their footing under Rodney Terry, and a Marquette team that they, to me, look much improved on defense from what they were a season ago.
Right now at this point, Greg, I'm all over Marquette in this game. I think it was a look-ahead spot with Wisconsin going on the road. They have played Kansas. They played Purdue tough. They played UCLA. They beat Illinois. They are battle-tested. I want to see it here with Rodney Terry in year 2. That is not to say he did a phenomenal job last year and deserved it, but oftentimes I will see coaches after they take over a program in their first year where there's continuity. Remember, he took over from Chris Beard. He had a ready-made team. I want to see it this year. They struggled against Louisville on a neutral. They won that game by 1. That Texas State game was very close. UConn, they hung and played well. I think this is a tough spot against Shaka Smart, who has been targeting this game. Clearly, he is a big-time coach and feels like he wasn't given a fair chance in Texas. Didn't get the job done, but I think he views this as I have to prove myself. They're going to be ready. They have circled this game. I think this is a big Marquette win. Love their numbers defensively here. Love how efficient they are inside. And I love Oso Ikadaro, who's been fantastic. I think he's going to be able to control the boards. Give me Cam Joe's getting hot from 3. I really like Marquette a lot. I agree with you. I think it's going to be a little high, but I see a double-digit win for Marquette here against Texas.
Yep, and if Iguodaro is able to hold up on the glass, that's the biggest key for Marquette. That's their biggest weak point, and that's where Wisconsin was able to expose them a little bit over the weekend in a game that, I tell you, being from the great state of Wisconsin, the Badgers, they always circle that game against Marquette. So that was a big-time one for them. I can tell you right now, though, if they can just do a solid job on the glass, I do think that Marquette going to be able to pull that one out, as well as Mike Randle, who does tremendous work over at FTN Bets, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And certainly we've got some interesting games that are going to be going down for Wednesday. And perhaps there are some teams that you're bullish/bearish on Wednesday. Perhaps there are going to be teams that we're going to be seeing a little bit later on during the week, but we're now through about a month of the season. So now we're getting a little bit more of a sample size. We're starting to get to know these teams a little bit better. We're a few teams to this point of the season that have either really impressed you or maybe you were in on them coming into the season and now you're a little bit more out on them.
Yeah, there's a couple on both. I still believe in Tennessee. They have lost 3 games in a row, but Purdue, Kansas, North Carolina, I mean, that can be about a roughest stretch as you could imagine. Rick Barnes has said this is the toughest November he's ever had, but this is a talented team with a unique style that I normally don't like, but I do right now. I think Florida Atlantic overcame their spot. I like them against Illinois. This game was going to be on Tuesday, so this podcast will drop. I do like them there as well. They got their stumbling block out of the way. But can we say enough things, Greg, about what Nico Medved is doing with Colorado State? 8-0 Colorado State. Beats Creighton, beats Colorado, went on a neutral and beat Washington. The team is number 2 in effective field goal percentage on offense. They are also number 4 inside the arc while shooting 38% from three-point range. Has done an outstanding job, should dispose of Denver no problem. And then on Saturday, December 9th, this Saturday, facing St. Mary's. Could Nico Medved get this team, Colorado State, to 10-0? I think it is quite possible here. So those are the 3 teams I like that have started the year. Some of the teams that I'm a little cooler on that I'm concerned, definitely concerned about Villanova. How can you not be? Those games in Philadelphia, those rivalry games are huge, Greg. St. Joseph's and Drexel at home back-to-back. Kyle Neptune is in trouble. He is on the hot seat. They have no patience. It was Jay Wright night, and they got destroyed. So very concerned about them. And I'm still waiting to see how North Carolina does. They look talented. They're getting up and down the floor, but there's something about them, Greg, that I don't trust them against the spread when they get in the ACC. Road game at Clemson, road game against NC State. Those are spots that I'm looking to target because I need to see it. Their offense and Armando Bacot is not as efficient as I think it needs to be. Florida State hung around way too much in that game. I have my eye on North Carolina. They're going to be good. They're going to have a great record, but are they going to be great against the spread? I think that's a little bit different, and I'm not sold on them yet.
Yeah, it's just so unique what we've been seeing in those home rivalries, to your point, with Villanova as well. Entering into Tuesday, they were 6-0 against all teams outside of the city of Philadelphia and 0-3 in games involving the Philly 5 showdown, which I can't remember ever seeing anything quite like it. A team that was able to win in the battle for Atlantis. So I thought that was so unique. And quite frankly, that was a little bit hilarious. And then in terms of the slate that we do have for Wednesday, we did lay out a few of the big ones. I think that South Carolina versus Clemson game is big. Certainly, I'm going to be having my eye on that Marquette versus Texas game as well. But is there any other games that really catch your eye, whether it be from a betting perspective or just a team or two that maybe you want to see a little bit more from? Maybe it's a team that you've got a few question marks that you want to see them be answered.
Yeah, I'm from New Jersey, and I love the job that Steve Peichel has done coming down from Stony Brook. He took Rutgers where no one would go to those games, and everybody always said, suppose Rutgers was ever good, how good would they be? And he's done a great job. However, I am concerned. 30% from three-point range, 46% from inside the arc, and the most important thing is so important handicapping, 64% from the free throw line. I do not like them going away to Wake Forest. Then they have Seton Hall on the road. This is a team that I'm concerned about. They're still solid and people like them, but I don't know if that's going to be a great spot for them. Not sure about that. Northern Iowa, we love the job that Ben Jacobson has done, but this team is really struggling. They were up big against North Carolina. They blew it. They were up against Texas Tech. They blew it. Then they came back and destroyed Stanford. But since then, lost to Belmont, lost to Evansville. Love those mid-majors. Love those teams like Northern Iowa who can come in and be a Cinderella in March, but they have been struggling. 2-6 now. They have Richmond and they go to Toledo. Those are normally games that should be spots. I think it's going to be a very difficult spot for them. And last one here, Greg, will the real Vermont stand up? Is John Becker just going to be a coach this year as he has a lot of moving pieces that's going to do well in the America East, or can they really make a run? That's the question I'm trying to decide here. They're going to have a nice game against Colgate, another fantastic matchup, a little mid-major for those that love college hoops. So those are some of the ones that I'm focusing in.
And that finish that we saw in that Vermont versus Yale game a few nights ago, that's one of the craziest things that you're ever going to see. I think Vermont was down like 5 points with less than 2 seconds remaining. They pull it out with TJ Long being able to get a 4-point play at the buzzer. I mean, that's just some of the wild things that you see in college basketball. And Mike, you do a great job of being able to decipher it all. You do amazing work over at FTN Bets, your own podcast, the Screener podcast as well. So love to get people at home know what's all on tap for you and how people are able to follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, follow me on X at Randall Rand. Of course, the accounts FTN Fantasy, FTN Daily, and FTN Bets. Our Discord is hopping. We're doing so well. Mike Kutry's almost up 100 units, Greg. It's crazy in player props so far. But come join us here at FTN. We have great stuff. Our models, Frank Brank's models here. It's just a great time. We're getting heated up. NFL is cooling down. The fantasy playoffs have started. So that means college basketball should even get more momentum as we head into 2020.
Oh, that is going to be absolutely tremendous. And Mike Kutry on those player props, it's been absolutely tremendous. Hopefully, for a few more player props out here in lovely Las Vegas. I will call out lovely Las Vegas. It's a nice city, but they need to be offering a few more of those. And Mike has been doing a nice job taking advantage of those. And both Mikes are doing a great job over at FTN because you got Mike Randle and you got Mike Kutry. And anytime either of those two gentlemen join this podcast, they always lend tremendous insights. And today it was Mr. Randle who stepped up. A big thanks to Mike for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. And coming up next, it is that time of the podcast to give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Wednesday as we hit some bank shots. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN family podcast. It is always great to be joined by Mike Randle, who does great work over at FTN Network and FTN Bets. Every single time he joins this show, he lends amazing insights, taking a look at this game that we all know and love. And I know that for those that are fans of football as well, he does a great job taking a look at player props and the fantasy side of the NFL as well. So big thanks to Mike for joining me in the last segment. Also, his podcast, Screen the Screener, you're able to find that wherever you get this podcast as well. So big thanks to Mike for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Wednesday as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that as per usual, any changes are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at GNet_81, and we are going to be going in Las Vegas rotation order. This is where we go with the games with 3 digits on the rotation first, and then the games with 6 digits. They involve the, shall we say, smaller conferences. I'm talking about the MEAC, the SWAC, the Patriot League, the America East, the Northeastern Conference, the Big South. the Southland. I think I have gotten all of them. I might have missed one, but that said, I do think that lays it out very well. And let's get things started with this first game of 671, 672 on the betting board, as it is South Alabama, and they're going to be hitting the road. They're going to be facing off against Mercer. Mercer finds themselves as a 1.5 point favorite. Your total is between 134.5 and 135, and I did set South Alabama's 1.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take them on the money line. You do have a pair of teams that they are not really looking to push tempo. South Alabama the last few seasons has become one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball, and you got a Mercer team that they just haven't really been able to fire on all cylinders in terms of their offense. You've got Jalen McCreary, so he will give you about 14 to 15 points per contest, but their big man David Craig being out of the fold, you tell how much that has meant to this team, as he was able to do a nice job down low last season, give the team 5+ rebounds, a block or 2 per game, so he would do a nice job of being able to stuff the stat sheet with that regard. But without him, now you really just have a backcourt that's really lackluster, and you go up against the South Alabama team that they do have to rely upon a lot of non-Division I transfers, like Isaiah Gator has come in. He's been really the main scorer for the team, being able to log about 15 points per contest. You've got Thomas Howell, who was over at Louisiana Monroe 8 seasons ago. He has seen a big downtick with his 3-point shooting at 6'8". Season ago, the shot 37% from 3, 9.5 points, 8 boards. That has really tapered off since going to South Alabama, more like 6 points, 5 boards. But when it comes to South Alabama, at the very least, we've got the best facilitator in this game. True freshman Marcus Melender has been able to do a nice job with 4 assists per game, currently shooting 47% from 3. Should see a fall off there, but you have a Mercer team that in general is having a really tough time finding anything with their offense. They've got as many turnovers as assists per game. They're shooting 62% at the free throw line. It's a rotation that they play a lot of guys, but these guys just really aren't able to step up. Meanwhile, South Alabama, they typically play a little bit of thinner rotation. They've had to go a little bit deeper this year because they're trying to figure out what they've got, especially with having Judah Brown currently out of the fold. Both of these teams lost a lot of scoring from a season ago, but having that veteran presence for South Alabama, Maxwell Land, who began his career over at St. Francis of Pennsylvania, a 3-year starter over there, I do think is going to be able to be enough to be able to get South Alabama to the window. Just don't have a lot of backcourt play with this Mercer team, and you've got a pair of teams that have really been struggling with their offense. As for Mercer, this is a bunch that has yet to break 70 points against a Division I foe this far this season. Meanwhile, to the credit of South Alabama, they have allowed 70 points or fewer in each of their last 3 games. So, just on my total 127.5, I think we get a grimy slog. I'm looking at the under. I'm looking at South Alabama outright on the money line. 673, 674 on the betting board. It is Wake Forest. They play also Rutgers. Rutgers is a 2-point underdog with your total between 139 and 140. Set my total at 135.5. I'm looking at the under. This is a Wake Forest offense that is not the same as last year, and this is a Rutgers team that is actually playing some really stinking good defense. I fully recognize that the game over the weekend that they played against Illinois did not go their way, but this team is number 5 in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. The one fear that you have, and this dates back to last year, is that they do give up significantly more points on the road than they do at home. For this year, they're giving up north of 20 points more per 100 possessions away from home than they do at home, and that was a very similar number to a season ago. But this Wake Forest team just isn't clicking on all cylinders on offense the way that they did a season ago. They have slowed down a little bit, and with this Wake Forest team, in terms of regulation, because they did play an overtime game against LSU, so in regulation only, they've been held to 72 points or fewer 4 of their last 5 games. For Wake Forest, they really don't even have 5 guys. I always like to make the 5 guys joke, that would be the restaurant that the team would be owning if you had that, but I mean, they're 1 guy short of that. They've got 4 guys that really do a nice job. Hunter Sallis gives you 19 points, shooting 44% from 3. Cameron Hildreth, a little bit of a do-it-all player, 18 points, 5 boards, 3 assists, had a triple-double in a game against Western Carolina last season. He's shooting 43.5% from 3. You've got Kevin Boopy Miller is more of your assist man, facilitator, 3.5 assists, 16.5 points per game, and then Austin Carr is your big man, 7.5 boards, 16 points per game. Nobody else really gives you north of 3.5 points per game. You have someone like a Mike Marsh that gives you a few rebounds, but that is it. And for Rutgers, you do have Cliff Omarui down low. Should be able to win that battle down low. He's been able to give the team 9 rebounds per game. It's certainly a diminished backcourt with this Rutgers team. They're only shooting about 30.5% from 3-point range. So I do like the game of Derek Simpson. He's not going to continue to shoot 54% from 3, but 10 points, 3 assists. It's done a relatively solid job taking care of the ball. And for Rutgers, they only turn the ball over 11 times per game, and they are stout down low with Omarui giving you 3.5 blocks per game. We shall see if they're able to get Muwat Mogg back in the fold as well. I know that he has been warming up. He's been doing more in terms of drills, what have you, but we have yet to see him out there on the floor. And I do think that there's some upside with the freshman and Gavin Griffiths. They've been giving him quite a few minutes as far this season. He's been a primary reserve, giving the team about 9.5 points per contest. Not a guy that's going to be able to dole out the ball, but I do think that Simpson fully capable of doing that. And we've seen a little bit more out of Noah Fernandez, the UMass transfer as well. 10 plus points in 3 out of the team's last 4 contests. So he had to combine 6 turnovers in the last 4 games, all while being able to give out 11 assists. And I do think that with Rutgers, just the overall depth with what they're able to get out of Cliff Marui as well, it is going to allow them to win out. And this is just a Wake Forest team that, because they have such a shortage of shooting options, they're just not the same offense as they have been in past years. I did set my total at 135.5. I'm diving in on the under. And with Rutgers, made them the 1.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to ride with them outright on the money line. 675, 676 on the betting board. Miami of Ohio, it's the road face-off against the Ohio State University. Ohio State between a 21 to a 22 point favorite. Totals between 146 and 147.5. With Ohio State, made them 23 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay this number with Miami of Ohio. They have Travis Steele as their head coach, and I really don't trust Travis Steele. I wish I could put it any other way, but I really can. And you got Darwishi Hunter who's having to do it all. 13 points, 5 boards, 2 assists for a team that, as a collective, does shoot 38% from 3-point range, but the 13.5 turnovers per game is not so great. This is not a team that's by any stretch of the imagination going to be playing at warp speed, and just don't have a lot of rebounding in general. You've got one guy that's giving you north of 5.1 rebounds per game. That'd be Jacquel Morris. He's come in and he's done a solid job. He's been able to give the team about 8 points, 5 boards after being a primary reserve a season ago, but they're just going to get destroyed down low by an Ohio State team that does have quite a bit of size. Got Felix Oparo, who's able to give you 6.5 rebounds, does a good job as a rim protector with about 2.5 blocks per game. Get a little bit more offense out of Zed Key, not a guy that's going to go out there and pop a bunch of threes, but 9.5 points, 6 boards, and then you've got really your main man flowing the offense of Bruce Thornton. He and Roddy Gale in tandem have been able to give you 8.4 assists to about 3.5 turnovers per game. Thornton is giving out 4.5 assists by himself with less than a turnover per game, and Gale and Thornton are both shooting north of 40% from 3. I think we should see a little bit of off with Ohio State shooting about 40.5% from 3-point range. That's just a number that I think is going to be coming down. But for Ohio State, is the defense like supreme by any stretch of imagination? No, but it is a little bit better than it was last year. They're about 86th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And after Miami of Ohio was ghastly on defense last year, they were giving up 109.8 points per 100 possessions. That's down to a more respectable 98.9 points. So while Miami of Ohio does lack some firepower with regards to their offense, their defense has been quite a bit better. Neither of these teams really play up tempo, so I do think that you're going to get a little bit of a lower scoring game. I did set my total at a 143. I think that Miami of Ohio going to be able to hold up from the outside. Neither of these teams is necessarily amazing at being able to get a bunch of turnovers or anything like that, but I do think that this Miami of Ohio team is going to be able to hold up on the defensive side of things. They've given up 64 points for fewer 3 out of their last 5 games, and one of those is a very forgivable result. Going on the road and giving up 74 points for Marshall is actually a really good defensive effort if you ask me, but with Ohio State, just too many weapons for this team, especially Jamison Battle and his versatility. 14 points, 5 boards, shooting 40% from 3. I think that Ohio State just takes it to Miami of Ohio. I did set Ohio State as a 23-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number and did set my total at a 143. So going under and going with the Ohio State University. 677, 678 on the betting board. Marshall plays those to Duquesne. Duquesne's a 4.5 to a 5-point road favorite. Your total's between 153.5 and 155.5. I do think that Duquesne should be a favorite, but I set this number at 2, so I'm going to be willing to take the points with Duquesne. They have been able to do a nice job on offense with Day Grant really being able to lead things. He's been logging in the neighborhood about 19.5 points per contest, so he's been a solid 3-point shooter. But for Marshall, even though they have been dealing with a few injuries down low, you've been dealing with mainly the injury to Obiana Onchile Killian, but looks like there's a good chance that he's going to be back to the fold in this game. Team's last game against Miami of Ohio, he was back with 9 points, 10 rebounds, multiple blocks, and Onchile Killian, if you go back to non-conference play 2 years ago, in non-conference play he was averaging 4 blocks per game. That is massive for this Marshall team, and he's able to pair up well with a little bit more of a primary rebound guy. As Onchile Killian is more of your rim protector, Nate Martin is more of your glass cleaner. 13.5 points, 2 blocks, 9.5 rebounds per game out of him. So it's a Duquesne team that they're going to have to do a lot of their damage from the outside, and it's a Duquesne team that shoots 36.5% from three-point range, but I also don't think that you're going to continue to have Mr. Kareem Rozier shoot 50% from three-point range, who's been tremendous as a primary ball handler, 10 points, 3.3 assists to go along with that three-point shooting percentage. You've got the Drame brothers in Fusani and Hassan Drame, who both have been able to lend some versatility, though Hassan Drame, he's been a little bit of a bust this year, 4 points, 3.5 boards. His brother Fusani, 9 points, 7 boards. He's currently shooting 62.5% from three. Again, I think we're going to see a little bit of a fall from the 62.5% three-point shooting. And for Marshall, well, they do a very nice job inside. They also typically do a good job of being able to generate steals as well. That's taken a little bit of a fall off this year, but it does feel like the Maryland Eastern Shore transfer and Kevion Voles is giving them a little bit more defense. 2 steals per contest. Now, for him, he's been a career about 33 or so percent three-point shooter. He's shooting just 26% this season. I do think that that's going to be rising up along Camden Kerfman, only shooting 29.5% from three-point range. Last year, this guy was shooting in the high 30s from three-point range, so I certainly do think that we're going to see a little bit of a bump up with that regard, and the biggest thing for Marshall is they've got to get back to that defense that they were playing a season ago. Season ago, Marshall was actually able to ascend into the top 75 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Currently, that is 234th. That is not necessarily too terrific, but I do feel like with Onchule Killian coming back in the fold, it is going to be able to help out quite a bit. Meanwhile, you got a Duquesne team that's been a little bit all over the place as far this season. They're a middle of the road team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but they do give up about 18 more points per 100 possessions when they're on the road rather than when they are at home. So I do expect a very much up and down game in this one. I did set my total at 160. Marshall is one of the more up-tempo teams in all of college basketball, and Duquesne is able to bomb from three, so going to be taking a look at the over. And while I do think that Duquesne is a little bit of a favorite, I think Onchule Killian coming back into the fold helps out this Marshall team. I set my line at 2, going to be willing to take the points with Marshall and the over. 679, 680 on the betting board. It is Towson. They play host to UMass. UMass is a 2.5 point favorite, and your total on this game is anywhere between 131.5 and 132.5. With UMass, set them as a 6.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. Towson last year was one of your better mid-major teams that was not able to make the NCAA tournament. This year, they have laid a big giant turd. I mean, I wish I could put it any other way, but this bunch just does not have anything in the backcourt. You've got Charles Thompson, who's done a nice job down low, 8.5 points, 8.5 rebounds per game, but outside of him, you've got one player averaging north of 7.5 points per game, Tyler Teata. He's come in as a 6'8" freshman, and he's been doing a solid job. Shooting in the mid-30s from three-point range, contributes about 11.5 points per game. I like what he's able to bring to the table, but for Towson, this is a bottom 10 team in the country in terms of possessions per game. They turn it over 13 times. They shoot 29% from three-point range, and outside of Thompson, they don't have a single guy that gives you north of 5 rebounds per game. That's not good. Meanwhile, you've got a UMass team that should be able to win that battle down low. Josh Cohn, he has come in from St. Francis of Pennsylvania, and he has been able to do a very nice job of just leading this offense. He and also Matt Cross, who's got some versatility, comes in from Miami, are combined for 17 rebounds per game. They're giving you combined about 35 points. Cross is a mid-30s three-point shooter, and for UMass, this team is not going to light it up in terms of their three-point shooting, but for how fast they go, the 10.5 turnovers per game is quite impressive because UMass, under this Frank Martin style, they are very much an up-tempo team in terms of total possessions per game. This team last season was in the top 100. They're about 40th this season. It's a little bit of a small sample size. For some reason, UMass only played 4 games in the month of November, but we have seen this UMass team really get after it on the defensive side of things as well. Their game against Harvard went to overtime, so if you're looking at regulation and regulation only, they've only allowed one opponent to exceed 70 points. Meanwhile, for Towson, this team is not getting anything going on offense. They have been able to get past the 65-point plateau just twice this far this season. They scored 66 against Robert Morris and 67 against a terrible Morgan State team. I mean, my goodness gracious. It's a good old spot of something's got to give. UMass is a team that plays very up-tempo. Towson, they've got absolutely nothing going on offense. I do think that this is going to be a game where we do see Towson be able to shoot a little bit better from three-point range. I do think, though, that UMass really going to take it out on this Towson bunch, and I do think that UMass is going to be playing in force, much like their coach Frank Martin wants them to. So I did say UMass as a favorite of 6.5 points. I think that they just completely obliterate Towson, as Towson does not have anything in the backcourt, so going to be one to lay this number. And I do think that this could be a game that is close enough for late game felling. If team is down 6 with a minute left to go, you always get the hackathon. So I did set my total at 138.5, going over and going to be one to lay the number with UMass. 681, 682 on the betting board. It is Brown. And what can Brown do for you might ask? Well, they're on the road against Rhode Island, and if they lose by 5 points or fewer, they can make you some money. They are between 5 and 5.5 point underdogs, Brown is, and your total's between 142 and 143. And with Brown, I set them as 2.5 point underdogs. I am going to be willing to trust in Brown. With this Brown bunch, it has been a rough start to the season, to say the least, but I do think that there's a good chance that they are able to turn it around. You've got a guy in Keno Lilly Jr., who I absolutely love. Last year, was able to shoot about 39.9% from three-point range, was a very good 15-plus point per game scorer, and he's still putting up big numbers this year, 19 points per game, but Brown has gotten too up-tempo for their own good. Last year, this defense was one of the best in all of mid-major college basketball because they played under control, they had things all buttoned up. Now they're trying to play at a top 80 pace in terms of total possessions per game, and it's clearly not working. They down low have two very good big men in Kalu Anya along with Nana Owusu Anane. These two guys combined for about 14.5 rebounds per game. Owusu Anane is a little bit more of your primary scorer, being able to give you about 16 points per contest. Chips in there a block per game as well, and it is a Brown team that outside of Keno Lilly Jr., they have had their issues with regards to shooting it from three-point range. As a collective, they're shooting about 30.5% from three-point range. They have had quite a few guys that have just in general been in and out of the fold. I know that they're dealing with like 2 or 3 ancillary guards, nobody that's necessarily super-duper primary, but ancillary guards have been dealing with injuries. And for Rhode Island, I take a look at this bunch, and it is a squad that has been really doing a better job from three-point range this year than they did a season ago. 3 out of your top 4 scorers shooting at least 37.5% from three-point range, including your 2 primary guards, Zeke Montgomery, Jaden Owens. They've come in via the transfer portal, and they're combined to shoot about 42.5% from 3, 15 points per game apiece out of these two guys. But I do think that with Rhode Island, they're just going to lose the battle down low. David Fuchs has been able to log about 6.5 rebounds per game, and he's really the only guy that's able to do a nice job down low. You were getting a little bit of Joseph Ballou. He's come back in the fold. He's now been able to give the team right around about 5.5 rebounds per game after he was dealing with an injury to begin the season, began his career at Wichita State. So perhaps that'll give Rhode Island a little bit of shot in the arm down low. But this Rhode Island team has been very inconsistent with their defense because there's the old saying of just because you play slow doesn't mean that you play tremendous defense. And Rhode Island is a slow team. They're in the bottom 100 in terms of total possessions per game, but they're 254th in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Brown is right now 200th after they were a solid defense a season ago. I do think that in a little bit of slowed down environment, and I do think that Rhode Island is going to look to slow things down. That is actually going to be to the advantage of Brown because I feel like they've been playing too fast for their own good, and I think that they get back to basics. I set this line at 2.5, so I'm going to be willing to take the 5 to 5.5 with Brown. I did set my total at 134.5. I do think that in a low-scoring environment where possessions are going to be at a premium, I do think that that is actually going to help this Brown team hang within the number. So we're going to have the under, and I'm going to be willing to take the points with Brown. 683, 684 on the betting board. VCU plays us at Memphis. Memphis is a favorite of 2 to 3 points with your total between 141.5 and 142.5. I did set VCU as an underdog of 5.5 points, so I'm going to be willing to lay the number. This Memphis bunch, in my opinion, just has too much athleticism. They are going to be able to really take it out of a bunch in VCU that has been a little bit rudderless and strange this year. Like with VCU, they've got some nice wins on their resume. They were able to go out there, they were able to take down Penn State by double figures. They held in there against Boise State, they held in there against Iowa State, and then they've got a ghastly loss on their resume to Norfolk State. It just really doesn't make a lot of sense. You can tell that this team is clearly missing Sean Bairstow. He came over with his coach in Ryan Odom, and without him in the fold, it's really had to be the Max Shulga and Zeb Jackson show. These two guys are combining for about 31 points per contest. Both are giving you 4 assists per game, but both are combining for about 5 turnovers per game. And with VCU, the team is in the bottom 100 in terms of total possessions per game with 15 turnovers per contest. You just can't be having that, especially from a VCU team that, I mean, they're solid on defense. I would not say that they're amazing on defense, as clearly it's not the same VCU team that we've seen in past years where they do a really nice job of generating turnovers. It's a VCU bunch that's about 82nd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. At Memphis, they always leave a little bit of something to be desired on the defensive end as well. They're currently 99th in the country with this regard, but Memphis has been very battle tested and just have no shortage of scoring options when it comes to the team. Now, what I want to see out of Memphis is more guys being able to pound the glass, as you've got one guy in David Jones that gives you north of 4.3 rebounds per game, and for Jones, 18.5 points, 6.5 boards, 2.3 steals. He has been incredible for a team that does shoot as collective 34.5% from three. Caleb Mills is a guy that's used to having the ball in his hands quite a bit. Jaquan Walton comes over from Wichita State. He's 6'7". He's able to bomb it from three-point range. And then Javon Quinterly, 4.5 assists per game. He's done a nice job with just 2 turnovers per game, but feels like it's a really talented team that's running around with like turkeys with their heads cut off, for lack of a better term. It's been very, very strange to take a look at, because you do have a lot of guys that typically they have the ball in their hands and they've had to take on a little bit of a different role. I would also like to see getting going a little bit more one of your main big men that came in the offseason, and Jordan Brown as well. This guy was awesome at Louisiana, former McDonald's All-American. 6 points, 4 boards. You just expect a little bit more out of him, and I do think that you are going to be able to get a little bit more out of him, especially going up against a VCU team that has been all over the place with their offense. 64 points or fewer in 4 out of their last 5 games, and you go up against a Memphis team that has allowed at least 75 points in 4 out of their last 5 games, so once again, situation of something's got to give. I did set my total at a 141.5. So here at a 142, 142.5, diving in on the under. VCU just feels completely stuck without Sean Bairstow, and I'm going to be willing to lay the number with Memphis. Set them as 5.5 point favorites. So riding with Memphis and the under. 685, 686 on the betting board. Central Michigan plays those to Valparaiso. Valparaiso is a 3 to 4 point underdog. Totals between 138.5 and 139. Valparaiso should be going back to being the Crusaders and not the Beacons. Ever since they made that name change, it has went horribly for them, and I think that's going to continue to go horribly. I set Central Michigan as a 5-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay this number with Central Michigan. This team, by no stretch of the imagination, is some sort of an amazing force or anything like that, but for Valpo, who's going to be able to score the ball outside of Isaiah Stafford? Stafford has actually done a really nice job. 18 points, 5 boards. He's shooting 37% from 3, but for this Valparaiso team, past that, you got one other guy that's giving you north of 8.5 points per game. Cooper Schweiger has been able to give you about 13 points per contest, but his team is collective. They're shooting about 33% from 3-point range. I like what Jerome Palm is able to do down low. He's been able to give you about 5.5 boards per game. Not necessarily much of a rim protector. You've actually got Schweiger coupled with Jackson Edwards, the transfer from Murray State, who have been combined for about 3 blocks per contest. And then you'd like to see a little bit more scoring out of Davius DiViero. I recognize that as a primary pass-first point guard, you don't need to score a ton, but would like to see more than 5.5 points per game, and he's done a better job recently. He has been able to get to at least 8 points in 3 out of the team's last 4 games, but for Central Michigan, they've got the best floor general out there, and that'd be Anthony Pritchard. His Tulsa team was poopy last year, but he was solid, and he's putting up right now 14 points, 5 boards, 5 assists, and 2.5 steals per game on 39% three-point shooting. Those are really good numbers. Now, for Central Michigan, they do need to cut down on the turnovers, 15 per contest, while Valparaiso, they're only turning the ball over about 10.5 times per contest, so that's going to be a little bit of an issue. Valpo really doesn't force a lot of turnovers, though, and for Central Michigan, typically the Achilles heel of this team is down low, as Brian Taylor at 6'6" is your primary rebounder with about 6.5 rebounds per game. That Achilles heel is not going to be unearthed in this game, though, and you've got plenty of guys that coming off the bench are able to bomb it from 3-point range. Someone like Aiden Rubio is able to shoot 36% from 3. Caden Vasco has been able to shoot it relatively okay, and he's been able to give the team about a steal per contest as well with about 5.5 points per contest. You've got Paul McMillan, the fourth, comes in from NJIT. Never been a primary 3-point shooter, but he's able to space the floor a little bit and has been able to give this team a little bit of veteran leadership in the backcourt as well. I do think that with Central Michigan, they are going to take it out on a Valparaiso team that has been one of the slowest in all of college basketball, and that's reflected in the fact that his team has scored 71 points or fewer in all but one of their games this far this season. And you do have a Central Michigan team that they themselves have had their struggles on offense. For Central Michigan, this team has not broken the 70-point plateau at all this season, so I do think that you're going to be in for a little bit more of a slog in this game. I set my total at a 137, so you're at 138.5, 139, diving in on the under, but with Central Michigan, I think that Pritchard is going to lead them to victory, willing to lay up to 4.5 with the Chippewas. 687, 688 is the DK Network write-up pick. You've got Penn State on the road facing off against Maryland. Maryland, a favorite of 8 points, and your total is between 140.5 and 141. My write-up pick is going to be on the under. I set my total at a 133.5. You've got yourself a Penn State squad that certainly is not looking to burn it up with regards to their possessions per game at 264th. And for Penn State, they're more of a mid-tempo team, but I do think that with having Maryland be very defense-oriented this season, they're going to be in for a whole heck of a lot of unders this year, much like last year. Last year, Maryland hit north of 60% of their games to the under. I could see something very similar, as you got Maryland 27th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and they have exceeded the 68-point plateau just twice this far this season. For Maryland, it has not been great from three-point range as well, and that is the biggest crux of this offense. For Maryland, out of 362 Division I teams, they are clocking in 359th in their three-point shooting percentage at a whole 22.7%. Jameer Young continues to be rock solid in the backcourt, being able to give this team 16 points, 4 assists, 2 steals, but you just don't have a lot of support around him. I was expecting a lot more of the freshman in Deshaun Harris-Smith, who's been able to log about 8 points, 5 boards, 2.5 assists per contest, but hasn't had that impact that I was expecting. And for Maryland, they've done a solid job on the glass, even though it's been a little bit top-heavy. Julian Reese has been your main guy, 9.5 boards, 15 points per game, but should be able to win that battle down low against a Penn State team that they very much rely upon Qudus Wahab, and they don't have a whole heck of a lot outside of Qudus Wahab. He's the only guy on the roster that's giving you north of 4.3 rebounds per game. And for Penn State, how about the way that they have amped up their turnovers? Last year, out of 363 Division I teams, Penn State was 361st in turnovers forced on a per possession basis. They bring in Mike Rhodes. They are now 12th in the country with that regard. With Rhodes, he brought in a few guys of his own. Nick Kern Jr. comes over from VCU. He's been able to give you about a steal and a block per contest. And then Ace Baldwin has been the ace in the hole. 14.5 points, 2.5 steals, 3.5 assists per contest. But it's Penn State team that's also struggling from three. They're only shooting about 29.5% from the outside. Mike Rhodes teams were never else really known for just being able to light it up from three-point range. And Maryland, they themselves are a top 50 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. I think that you've got yourself a sloppy Joe sort of game, though Penn State has given up north of 75 points now each of their last 4 games. This team still does rank about 71st in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They get a gift going up against a Maryland team that has been all over the place with regards to their offense. Sans when they played against UMBC and Ryder, they just have not been able to put up anything whatsoever. I think that you're in for a low-scoring slug, and after Penn State got embarrassed as darn near a 20-point favorite against Bucknell, I do think that you're going to be able to get a better effort. Kenny Cleary to be able to give you about 15 points per contest. I like what Zach Hicks is able to bring to the table. He's a little bit versatile, giving you about 7.5 points, 4.5 boards, able to pop it from three-point range. But I do think that the three-point shooting continues to be rough, and I think both of these defenses bear down. My DK now regret pick is on the underside. My total at 133.5, and at 6 or more, won't take the points with Penn State, set them as a 5.5 point underdog. 689, 690 on the betting board. It is Campbell. They hit the road face off against Davidson. Davidson, a 14 to a 15 point favorite, and your total is between 129.5 and 131. I said Davidson as a 12 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take these points with Campbell. Campbell has been one of the slowest and sloggiest teams in all of college basketball, as this team is currently outside the top 325 in terms of total possessions per game. They do need to find a primary number 2 to Anthony De La Rosa. He's had to do a little bit of everything. 16.5 points, 5.5 boards, shooting 37.5% from three-point range. And despite the fact that this Campbell team is playing at a snail's pace, they are turning the ball over right around 14 times per game, which Davidson, they're also playing very slowly. This team is outside the top 300 in terms of total possessions per game, but they've done a better job of valuing the ball. They're shooting 35% from 3, 10.8 turnovers per contest, and it's really a rebound by committee sort of team. You've got a trio of guys, Grant Huffman, David Skogman, Angelo Breezy, who have all been able to give you between 5.3 and 5.8 rebounds per game, and Huffman has done a really nice job of being that sort of do-it-all point forward. About 11 points, 5.5 boards, 5.5 assists at 6'4", 6'5", so he gives you a nice versatility there, and I do think that that's massive, along with Connor Kuchera stepping up, shooting 43.5% from 3, but for Davidson, they have each of their top 4 scorers shooting at least 40% from 3. I do expect a little bit of a fall off here, as everyone else has actually shot really, really bad, so I do think that the distribution of these main threes going to be balancing out a little bit. But for Campbell, I do think that you're starting to see a little bit more help for De La Rosa. Lorenis Vesterius has been able to give you about 9.5 points, 2.5 assists per contest, logging 9+ points in each of the team's last 4 games, and is coming off of in the team's last game 9 assists and 4 steals in 22 minutes. So that is what you like to see for this Campbell team. Campbell without J-Pal, they've been struggling down low. They don't have anyone other than De La Rosa who's been able to give you north of 4 rebounds per game. But with this Campbell team, I do think that they're going to be able to hold up from the outside. It has been a little bit of an up and down defense. And really both of these teams, despite the fact that they play at a slow tempo, they do leave a little bit of something to be desired defensively. Davidson, 262nd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Campbell is 180th, and Campbell is really not seeing too much of a fall off with their defense when they have been on the road. And I do think that you get a little bit of something out of backcourt piece Gediminas Mosekis, who comes in from Lithuania. He's been able to give you 6 points, 2 assists, has good versatility at 6'4", and I do think that this number has gone out of whack for a Davidson team that is one of the slowest in all of college basketball. I did set my total at 128. I think both teams are going to be coming up short on the offensive side of things. I'm going to be looking at the under, and here at 15-14, I'm going to be willing to take the points with Campbell, set them as a 12-point dog. 691, 692 on the betting board. It is Youngstown State on the road facing off against Ohio. The Ohio Bobcats find themselves a 6.5 to 7.5 point favorite. See what I did there? And your total between 156 and 157.5. And with the Ohio Bobcats, I set them as a 5.5 point favorite. So we're going to be taking the Penguins in this spot. With Youngstown State, certainly has been a less than savory start to the season for them, and they're going to need a little bit more of something down low other than DJ Turn It Up Burns, who's been able to give you 8 rebounds per game. But fortunately, that Achilles heel is probably not going to be too unearthed in this game, as you've got an Ohio bunch at right now. You've got one guy that's logging north of 5.1 rebounds per game, and that'd be Elmore James, who stands 6'3", 13.5 points, 6 boards, has been highly versatile. And you've got an Ohio team that they bomb it from 3-point range. 9.4 turnovers per game on 34% 3-point shooting, despite the fact that this Ohio team has really cranked up the tempo. Jeff Bowles, in every year that he's been at Ohio, he's gotten the team playing seemingly faster and faster. They're up to the top 90 in terms of total possessions per game, with the AJs really doing a lot of work from the outside. AJ Clayton, AJ Brown, a combined 24.5 points per contest. We have seen Brown slide to about 30% with his 3-point shooting. After last year, that was closer to 40%. Meanwhile, AJ Clayton shooting north of 50% from the outside, and we've got really good facilitation with this team. Sharif Mitchell comes over from Creighton, 1.3 steals, 14 points per contest, and Jalen Hunter, how about 17 points, 5 boards, 4.5 assists, steal and a half per contest. I mean, these guys have been absolutely remarkable, but for Ohio, sans AJ Clayton, this team has really had a lot of guys struggle from 3-point range. Meanwhile, for Youngstown State, there's just a little bit more distribution with this team. They bring in Ziggy Reed, who was over at Merrimack a season ago, 11 points, 4.5 boards on 40% 3-point shooting. Brandon Rush has been your main guy with 13 points per game. Now, you are going to need a little bit more moving forward out of someone like an EJ Farmer. He does come in out of Toledo, 5.5 points per game 2 seasons ago at Toledo, shot about 40% from 3-point range, so you're going to need him to come around a little bit. But this is a Youngstown State team that they do a solid job taking care of the ball, as they are turning it over about 11.5 times per contest. And certainly with Youngstown State, they've never been the most efficient defense in the world, but you know what? 124th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. That's pretty passable. Meanwhile, Ohio is more around 170th, and I do think that with this Youngstown State team being able to do a solid job on the glass, they've got enough firepower in the backcourt to be able to hold up. So I just said Ohio is a 5.5 point favorite. Being able to get north of 6, I'm going to be looking at those points with Youngstown State, and did set my total at a 157.5. Both of these teams, they like to push the tempo a little bit more. Youngstown State has seen a fall off from it, but last year they were a top 15 team in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and I do think that they're going to be able to do a solid job in this ordeal. So it is a spot where I'm going to be taking a look at this total over, and with north of 6, taking the points with Youngstown State, 693, 694 on the betting board. Niagara is going to be playing us to St. Bonaventure. The old Bonnies find themselves as a favorite of 8 to 8.5 points for totals between 136.5 and 137.5. I set Niagara as an underdog of 4 points, so I'm going to be willing to take those points with this St. Bonaventure team. They certainly have a lot of experience. They brought back north of 90% of their scoring from season ago. It just feels like there's something missing from this team. They've got Jan Farrell, who, he changed his name. He's now known as Isam, something that I can't pronounce. But that said, he last season was a really nice 6'6" combo player. He's this year had a big giant fall off with only about 7 points, 5 boards. Last year shot in the mid-30s from 3-point range. That's down to about 22% thus far this season, though. You do have a lot in the backcourt. Mike Adams-Woods is able to come in from Cincinnati, and he's been able to do a solid job with about 13.5 points per game. And what I do like about St. Bonaventure as well is that they've been able to do a solid job winning the turnover battle. They force about 3 more turnovers than the ones that they commit themselves. You've got Chad Venning, who's been able able to do a nice job down low, giving you about 4 boards, 2 blocks per game, so he's been a little bit of a rim protector, but you just have a offense that in general, sometimes it feels like they go a little bit too much to Charles Pride, who's been a good three-point shooter at 42.5% from three-point range, but you got a lot of guys that are used to being primary scorers that are having to take on different roles. And for Niagara, this always has been and always will be one of those old holes greater than the sum of its parts sorts of teams, as they bring in Greg Paulus as their coach, and he's done a nice job of having this team play at one of the slowest tempos in all of college basketball. Now, once again with Niagara, the same holds true for them as it does with all teams. Just because you play slow doesn't mean that you play amazing defense, as Niagara is a super slow team that's 277th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. But I do think that they're going to be able to do an okay job down low, because they've now gotten 7.5 rebounds per game out of Harlem Obiana, and then on top of that, the true freshman Ahmad Henderson II. They have found a gem here. How about 15 points per game on 37% three-point shooting? It is a Niagara team that does a good job of executing their offense in general. They do shoot about 37% from the outside. I think that the best is still yet to come. You bring in Luke Bumbalo along with Kwan Marble, who have had previous success at previous stops, with Marble at Wyoming during the 2020-21 season was logging about 9.5 points per game. The season before that had shot about 36% from three. And Luke Bumbalo, 2 seasons ago at Ball State, his primary starter, 11 points, nearly 3 assists per game on 35.5% three-point shooting. If these guys are able to elevate a little bit, I think that you're really staring at something with this Niagara team. For St. Bonaventure, they've been very stout with their defense. They did give up north of 75 points to Auburn, but really past that, they have not allowed north of 70 points all season long. Meanwhile, you've got a Niagara team that is very content to play slow and controlled. This Niagara team has been able to break the 70-point plateau against one Division I team thus far this season. So I do think that you're in for a little bit more of a slog. I did set my total at a 130, so you're at the 136 after 137. I'm not sure why we are getting that sort of a number, but I'm going to be willing to take it under, and say Bonaventure could only set them as 4-point favorite. Going to be willing to take the points with Niagara, and going to be taking a look at the under. 695, 696 on the betting board. It is Yale, and they play host to Fairfield. The Stags of Fairfield find themselves as underdogs of 15 points. Your total is between 145.5 and 146. I set Yale as a 19.5 point favorite. I am going to be willing to lay it with the Bulldogs. This is a Fairfield bunch that had their coach and Jay Young get canned about 3 weeks before the start of the season, and they have been all out of sorts. This is a Fairfield team that in past years, they were one of the slowest, most controlled teams in all of college basketball, and they're playing much faster this year, as it really resulted in too many points. Now, I will say they have been able to get to 80 in 2 of their last 3 games, but also in 3 of their last 5 games, they have scored 67 points or fewer, so they have been an all-or-nothing team. Meanwhile, you've got a Yale bunch that I would like to see them get back to their defensive roots of a season ago. Last year, Yale was pretty darn terrific on the defensive side of things. They were in the top 20 nationally in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're now up to about 220th, but as the defense has been in a nosedive, the offense has been much more efficient. Baz Embeg has been terrific with 15 points, 3 assists. You've got a Yale team that as a whole, they only turned the ball over about 9.2 times per contest. They're shooting about 35.5% from three-point range, and Yale has upped their tempo a little bit, but it's not like they're playing at warp speed or anything like that. Yale about 267th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. They're playing about a half a possession per game faster than they did a season ago, and right now for Fairfield, they're just without all of their parts. Alexis Yetna, he was a big-time transfer for the team, and has played as many games as myself, so they've had to really rely upon their 2 main backcourt pieces, as you've got Bryson Gudine has been able to give you 14 points, shooting currently 45% from three-point range, and Jalen Leach has been able to give you about 12.5 points per contest, but you need a little bit more, in my opinion, out of Caleb Fields. He's always been a relatively solid facilitator, but has never really been able to take that next step forward, as he's currently logging about 10.5 points per contest. It's a Fairfield team that overall shoots about 33.5% from 3. They do generate about 8 steals per game. You've had Jasper Floyd actually give you about 3 steals per contest, but it's a little bit of a top-heavy team that has absolutely nothing down low. They lose Supreme Cook from a season ago, with Yale having Danny Wolf down low, is able to give you 9 rebounds per game, a skilled big man, and Matt Noling. I think that's going to be just too much for Fairfield to overcome, and this is a Fairfield team that just still has not found their identity. Meanwhile, I do think that Yale's identity of being a defense-oriented team, it is going to be coming back to the forefront as the schedule eases up. So I did set my total at 141.5. I'm diving in on the under, and with Yale, willing to lay up to 19 with them. 697, 698 on the betting board. Old Dominion, it's a road face-off against William and Mary. You don't just get William, you don't just get Mary, but you get both, along with 2.5 to 3 points if you back them. Total's anywhere between 146 and 146.5. I'm going to be taking a look at the under. I did set my total at a 137.5. William & Mary has been playing much faster this season, but at the same time, I can't necessarily say that they've been too efficient of a team. And with Old Dominion, I did have to set them as a 3.5 point favorite. As much as I always love being able to make jokes about backing the tag team, we have to think with our head rather than just trying to make some witty jokes. And with this William & Mary team, I just do not see it with them. With William & Mary, they did lose quite a few guys from the offseason that were integral parts of this offense, like Ben White, and they're really going to need to try to get some open threes because you do have guys who are able to bomb it from three-point range, with the biggest of them being Gabe Dorsey. Dorsey has been able to give you 15 points. He's currently shooting 45.5% from three-point range, and Charlie Williams has been able to shoot about 45.5% from three-point range as well, with about 7 points per contest. But this team really doesn't have anything other than Noah Collier down low. He got back in the fold after he was dealing with a little bit of an injury towards the beginning part of the season. Is back out there for 3 games after last season. He had about 8 rebounds per game. Now he's injured once again, which leaves you with Chase Lowe as about the only player on the roster that has given you north of 5 rebounds per game. You've had Jack Karzinski, who stands right around 6'8", 6'9". He's been able to log about 7 points, 5 boards. Gives you a little bit of versatility as well. But I do think that with Old Dominion, the team is just the well put together team that is going to be able to do a better job of execution in general. For Old Dominion, you've got Chauncey Jenkins in the backcourt, who really does a nice job of headlining this offense with 17 points, 2.5 assists per contest. It's an Old Dominion team that always does a relatively solid job of protecting the ball. 11.5 turnovers per game. It's a bunch that they shoot as a collective about 37.5% from three-point range. And I think the big key for this team is if you're able to get a little bit more in general of RJ Blakeney, a guy that I really liked when he was over at Dayton a few seasons ago. He's only been able to give you in that neighborhood about 6.5 points per game. That really elevates the team because you've got Vashawn Aliette along with Tyrone Williams, who've been able to combine for 25 points per contest. With Williams, he's able to give you 7.5 rebounds per game. And for this team in general, you now have Old Dominion with 5 different guys giving you at least 4 rebounds per game, including Dorico Williams, who was out to begin the season. He's come back as a primary just low post player, been able to give you more rebounds and points with about 3 points, 4 boards. Has always been relatively solid on the glass, but I do think that if you're able to get a little bit more out of Blakeney, who has actually shot 50% from 3 in the sparing amount of threes that he has taken, that's going to be a lot of upside for an Old Dominion bunch that traditionally they do a relatively solid job with just their overall defense of just being able to pound teams with that regard. And if you take a look at the points allowed on a per possession basis for this William & Mary team, it is quite ghastly with them as well. 345th in all of college basketball. Old Dominion, typically a bottom 75 team in terms of total possessions per game. They are right back to being that. Old Dominion has had a little bit of a rough time with their defense as well outside the top 250 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but I think a lot of that is a product of the competition that they have been playing in terms of the beginning part of the season. I do think that they're going to iron that out in what is going to be a low possession game against William & Mary. I did set Old Dominion as a favorite of 3.5 points, so I'm going to be willing to lay up to 3 with them, and did set my total 137.5, so we're going to be looking at the under and Old Dominion laying the number. 699, 700 on the betting board. Canisius is going to be playing us a Robert Morris. Old Bobby Morris finds himself as a underdog of between 7 and 7.5 points. Your total is between 143 and 144, and with Canisius, did set them as a favorite of 5.5 points. So I'm going to be willing to take the points with Robert Morris. Robert Morris did bring in some talent via the transfer portal, and I do think that they are starting to mesh just a little bit more. I've been able to get a nice double figure, 14.5 points per game out of Justice Williams, a former top 250 recruit that began his career at LSU. Not necessarily bombing it from three-point range, but that's why you've got the likes of Josh Corbin along Marquise Hastings. Hastings comes in from Central Michigan, and I didn't know he had quite this much in him from three-point range, because last year at Central Michigan, sparingly took threes, and when he did, he shot less than 25% from the outside, while giving the team 9.5 rebounds per game. He's still stuffing it with regards to the rebounds in terms of 8.5 boards per contest, a steal and a half per game, but now 14 points per game, shooting 44% from the outside. That's really been an elevator for a team that I don't think was expecting it. That's big too, because you only have one other guy that gives you north of 40 rebounds per game. That'd be Stephon Walker, who's been able to give you 6.5 rebounds per game. They go up against a Canisius team that doesn't have a ton of size around their main rebounder in Frankie Mitchell, but with Frankie Mitchell, about 12 points, 9.5 boards per contest. He really does a nice job with that regard. You could use a little bit more out of Bryce Oakpo, who's giving you more like 5 rebounds per game, and then you've got the brother of Jaco Fritz, Yuri Fritz, who's now in the fold, as he is a 6'9", little bit of a point forward that gives you multiple assists, a steal, 7 points, 4.5 boards. Just a really good glue guy in general for a backcourt that involves Trey Dinkins along Siem Ojengendal, who've been able to combine for about 28 points per game. Both of these guys shooting north of 41% from three, and each of your top 5 scorers that have made at least 1 3 thus far this season for Canisius are all shooting at least 36% from three, with each of your top 4 shooting at least 41% from the outside. As a whole, Canisius is shooting 40.3% from three-point range, and this is a very good shooting team in general. I do think that we are going to be seeing a little bit of a fall-off with this regard. I do think that this is just one of these cases where we are seeing a little bit of an outlier with regards to scoring. Now, Robert Morris has been a little bit all over the place in terms of their defense, but it is a Robert Morris team that, once again, is looking to play rather slow, rather controlled, and this is a Canisius team that has also done a good job of being able to guard the three-point arc this far this season as well. Opponents are shooting 27% from three, and I do look at that as well, and I think we're going to see a little bit of a fall-off. It certainly is an improved Canisius team. I don't think that they're improved in that regard. Meanwhile, Robert Morris is allowing opponents to shoot about 33% from three, more around NCAA average, something that I do think is sustainable, and I do think that with Robert Morris getting more and more footing with these transfers, I do think that they're going to be able to hold in this game, a game where I do expect Canisius to turn the ball over quite a bit, as they have been turning it over right around 13.5 times per contest. It's a Robert Morris team that has had a tough time with their offense, 68 points or fewer in 4 of their last 5 games. Meanwhile, you do have a Canisius squad that they themselves have given up at least 73 points in 3 of their last 4 games. So it is a situation of something's got to give. I do think that things are going to be bogged down a little bit, because I do think that Canisius is going to start to go a little bit colder with their 3-point shooting. I did set my total at a 141.5, so going to be taking a look at the under. And in terms of the side, going to be willing to take the points with Robert Morris, set Canisius as a 5.5 point favorite. 7-1, 7-2 on the betting board. It is Hofstra, and they hit the road. They're facing off against Iona. Iona finds themselves as a underdog of 2.5 points. Your total is between 150 and 151. And with Iona, I did make them a underdog of 2 points. So seeing them at 2.5, this is now my buy point on Iona. I need to get the hook on 2, but I'm going to be willing to take it as long as we do have that hook, as you've got a Hofstra bunch that has just been so tremendous with their backcourt, but the front court does leave quite a bit of something to be desired, as you've got Heather Thomas, who's really become that primary scorer after a season ago that was one Aaron Action Estrada. Thomas has really been able to take over that mantle, as he's putting up 25 points per game. That leads all of college basketball, shooting 45.5% from 3, 4.5 boards, 3.5 assists per game, and this is a really good shooting team in Hofstra, but I don't know if their 40% three-point shooting is quite sustainable. I think that this goes down to more like 37, 38%. You've gotten some unexpected production out of some like German Plinkoff, and you've also got Keyshawn Robinson, both combining for about 11 points per game, and they're combining to shoot about 44.5% from three-point range. Now, Waquan Carlos has done a nice job doling out the ball, 6.6 assists and 2.6 turnovers per game, and Darlson Dunbar is able to give you 19 points, 5 boards per contest, and while Hofstra, by committee, their top 4 scorers all do give you at least 4.4 rebounds per game, you really don't have any size for this team, and with Iona, it does hurt them quite a bit that their 7-footer in Osborne Shema has yet to be able to take the floor, but I do think that someone like 6'7" combo player Wiesa Ponzo is going to be able to help out down low. Not known for his rebounding, but a season ago at Stetson was able to pull in there 4.5 boards per contest. He had 6'7" over the last 2 seasons. He's combined to shoot about 44% from three-point range. Got Isaac Trout, who's able to give you 16 points. He's able to really light it up from three-point range as well, shooting about 40%. And Iona themselves shoots about 37.5% from the outside. And with Iona, they do a very solid job being able to generate some steals. 9.5 per contest. Meanwhile, it is a Hofstra team that they're only getting more around 6 per contest. Now, with Hofstra, they really improved their defense towards the back half of the season last year. Last year in conference play, Hofstra was a top 25 team in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but this year they've been getting a little bit cooked from the outside. 195th in the country in opponent's three-point shooting percentage. Iona's right there on par with them at about 179th, but I do think that Iona does have the backcourt to be able to hold in this game. You've got a nice pass-first guy in Joel Brown that doesn't give you a lot of scoring, but I mean, he was a starter at the ACC level, an assist-to-turnover ratio that is north of 3, and with Iona being able to take care of the ball, I do think that we're looking at a nice little bit of a shootout involving two teams that don't necessarily go super-duper up-tempo out there in New York. I did set my total at a 150. I think that with Hofstra, we're going to see a drop-off from their 40% three-point shooting, so I do think that just based on that little bit of variance, you've got a little bit of an edge to the under, and then with this Hofstra team, I did set them as 2-point favorites, so being able to get 2.5 or more, I'm going to be taking a look at the points with Iona and going to be taking a look at this total under 7-3, 7-4 on the betting board. Ball State, it's the road face-off against Detroit. Old Detroit finds themselves as a underdog of 1.5 points at home. Totals between 137.5 and 139.5. And with Detroit, I did set them as an underdog of 3 points. I'm going to be willing to lay this small number with Ball State. With Detroit, they've got a really nice scorer in Jaden Stone, who prior to him going down with an injury a season ago was shooting 51.5% from three-point range through 13 games. And he's not quite shooting 51% from three-point range as far as the season, but the guy has been pretty stinking efficient. He's been able to shoot about 36.5% from three-point range, 21 points, 6.5 boards, but he doesn't have a whole heck of a lot of help around him, as he's currently also leading the team in rebounds. He's been able to get a little bit of versatility out of 6'8" Eduardo Del Cadia. He comes in from the country of Italy, 9.5 points, 6.5 boards. He's able to pop a few threes. He's able to give you 3 assists per contest, so love what he's able to bring to the table. But for Detroit, despite these two guys being very rock solid with their three-point shooting, nobody else on the roster is shooting above 31% from three. They, as a collective, are shooting 30% from the outside. Outside these two guys, you don't have a single other guy that's able to give you 4 rebounds per game. And much like Detroit was very top-heavy with Antoine Davis the last 5 seasons, you're seeing the same song and dance this year with Detroit once again outside the top 300 in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis. And Ball State is not the steel curtain in regards to their defense, but they certainly are a little bit better than this Detroit team. For Ball State, they have been getting cooked from the outside, 298th in the country in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, at 223rd in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis. But that's better than being outside the top 300, as you've got Bashir Jihad, who's been able to do a nice job with 17.5 points, 6.5 boards, and he gives you some good versatility. He's been able to shoot about 34.5% from 3 points. Ball State as a whole, each of your top 4 scorers shoot at least 34.5% from 3, shooting about 35.7% from the outside. They bring in LMU transfer Jalen Anderson, who's been able to give you 14.5 points, 3.5 boards, 4 assists. Does a nice job stuffing the stat sheet. It is a little bit of a top-heavy team. You would like to see a little bit more from someone like a Mason Jones, who comes in as a freshman, and he's been getting more and more minutes. Perhaps he'll be able to elevate off of that. It is a Ball State team that stands there. Few transfers coming in like Anderson. They are a pretty young team, but just take a look at this Detroit team, and you've got 2 guys that are contributing at this point. You got a defense that has been awful, and when you have an awful defense, you can't afford to be scoring 67 points or fewer 4 of your last 5 games. It's a big reason why old Detroit has as many wins as Greg Peterson. Meanwhile, we have seen this Ball State team be a little bit better on defense. It's not saying a ton, but 74 points or fewer surrendered in 4 of their last 5 games. So it is a spot where I'm going to be willing to lay the small number with Ball State, set them as a 3-point favorite. And got a Detroit team that is playing super duper slow with regards to their tempo, but they're just so inefficient on the defensive side of things. I like the over. I did set my total at 141, so going in on the over, and I'm going to be willing to lay the small number with Ball State. 7-5, 7-6 on the betting board. It is Toledo, and they're going to be on the road facing off against Oakland. Oakland is a pick 'em to a 1-point favorite, and your total is between 155 and 155.5. And with Oakland, I did set them as a favorite of 3.5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay this number. This is just not the same Toledo team as a season ago, as with Toledo, they lost so many of their primary scorers from a season ago, including really the best player in the conference in Ray J. Dennis, which has left it up to Raheem Moss and Dante Maddox to really take hold of the offense. And Maddox has shot it well from 3-point range. He's shooting about 38.5% from 3-point range. And between Moss and Maddox, they've done a nice job by committee of being able to facilitate combined 5 assists, 3 steals per contest. And what I do like about this Toledo team is that they realized that they weren't going to be able to replace Ray J. Dennis all by themselves. So you've got pretty much 4 of your top 5 scorers, all giving you between 2.3 and 2.7 assists per game. Nobody above 3. None of these guys really below 2.7. But that said, this is also a team that's not really that stout down low, with having your top rebounder being Mr. Moss, who's been giving you about 5 rebounds per game. And for Oakland, Trey Townsend, I think, is going to present a little bit of a matchup nightmare for Toledo, as he's done a really nice job at 6'8" of being able to put it in there from 3-point range, 15.5 points, 7.5 boards, shooting 44% from the outside. You once again have Rocket Watts being the king of inefficiency, as he's given the team 9 points on good old 25% 3-point shooting. But you know what? He has been able to put in there multiple assists per game. And for Oakland, is this defense amazing? By no stretch of the imagination are they, but they're a whole heck of a lot better than they were last season. Oakland was pretty ghastly on defense last few seasons. Now, in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, they're 226th. Doesn't sound like a ton, but that's marked improvement from the last few seasons. And Toledo, I mean, this is always a rough defense. 255th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And while Toledo is still a very solid offense, they're not quite the same offense that they were a season ago, because they were actually literally number 1 in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. And now Toledo, they are 281st in the country in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. This is an Oakland team that's willing to bomb it, and Oakland is more of a national average team in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, with having someone like Jack Golke, who's done a nice job taking 11.5 threes per game. He shoots 89% at the free throw line, 32% from the outside. He is very much a volume scorer. I do think that Oakland finds a way to be able to get it done, because I do think that they're going to win from within with Towson. So I did set my total at a 153.5. I do think that we're going to see a little bit more defense played in this game. Toledo is very fast, but they really relied upon efficiency for a lot of their overs a season ago, and they're just not quite there, unlike a season ago. So I'm going to be diving in on this total under. Now with Oakland willing to make them the favorite of 3.5 points, so taking them as a pick 'em. 7-7, 7-8 on the betting board. It is Drake, and they play us to St. Louis. St. Louis is an underdog of 13 points with your total between 153 and 154. Set my line at 15. I'm going to be willing to lay it with Drake, and my goodness gracious, talk about Murphy's Law for St. Louis. They have Sincere Carey go down with an injury to begin the season, and now on top of that, apparently Terrence Hargrove Jr. is dealing with a little bit of a bone bruise, and now you're going to be perhaps without Gibson Jimerson, your top scorer with 15 points per game, as he's now injured. I mean, my goodness gracious, St. Louis has just had Murphy's Law hit them the last few seasons. You're going to have Tim Dalger, who's able to give you 10.5 points, 5 boards, and Mike Meadows does a nice job doling out the ball. 3 assists to less than a turnover per contest. St. Louis team that's taking care of the ball, but a big reason why they shoot about 37% from 3 is because you've got Gibson Jimerson being a volume scorer that shoots about 35.5% from 3, and while he doesn't quite shoot 37% from 3, he takes a load off for so many of these other guys, like Larry Hughes II. You've got a 50% three-point shooter as well that has been able to give you about 6 points, 4.5 boards, and Kellen Thames. Now they have to pick up the slack, and for Drake, this team has not been defensively what they have been in past years, but you're still going to be able to win the battle down low with Darnell Brody shipping in there 14 points, 7 boards, and Tucker DeVries is by far the best player out there on the floor. 20 points, 6.5 boards, 2 steals per game, shooting only about 31% from three-point range. With them having the ball in his hands a little bit more, that efficiency has went down a little bit, and I would like to see this Drake team be able to have someone outside of DeVries be able to log about 3 assists per game. Will that be Connor Enright? He's been able to give you about 2.5 assists per game. You've also gotten about 2.5 assists out of the freshman and Kobe Garland. Would like to see one of those guys be able to step up, and Enright is currently shooting 50% from 3. Certainly, I think that there's going to be a little bit of fall off there, and just need a little bit more in general out of Kyron Gibson. He comes in after at UT Arlington a season ago. He logged 12 points per game on 36% three-point shooting. He's hardly gotten out there on the floor thus far this season, but you know that Drake is going to be very efficient on the offensive side of things. 8.8 turnovers per game. They do a very solid job in terms of their backcourt just being able to fire on all cylinders. That 4-guard system works out very well for them, and when St. Louis not having anything on the inside and St. Louis being all sorts of banged up, it's been an offense that has really been up against it. They have failed to get to the 70-point plateau in 4 of their last 5 games, going up against a Drake team that's starting to find it once again on defense. 65 points of fear surrender in 3 of their last 4 games. I think that you're looking at a pretty good butt kicking. I did set my total at 145. Again, with St. Louis having so many injuries, I think that they're really going to struggle on the offensive end, and with Drake willing to lay up to 14.5 with them. 7-9, 7-10 on the betting board. San Francisco, it's a road face-off against Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt finds themselves as underdogs between 2.5 and 3 points, and your total between 138 and 138.5. Set the Dons as a 3.5 point favorite. I'm going to be one to lay it. I talk about how hard it is to win on the road in college basketball this year. That is unless if you're facing off against Vanderbilt. And Vanderbilt has a nice home court at Memorial Stadium, and it has a weird benches and everything like that. But for Vanderbilt, they've already lost at home to the Blue Hosts of Presbyterian. I recognize that they were able to have a little bit of a triumph against UNC Greensboro. It's actually a pretty solid school, but man, it's been rough for them. They very nearly lost at home to Central Arkansas. They're just dealing with so many injuries right now, it's not even funny. Well, right when you get the likes of Van Allen Lubin and Tyron Lawrence back in the fold, you have Ezra Magnon and Colin Smith now dealing with injuries. Good news is Magnon was able to return in that game against Alabama A&M at 7 assists, so should be all good to go, and he's really the primary guy for this Vanderbilt team. 17 points, 4 assists. He throughout his career has been a solid 3-point shooter at about 38.5% thus far this season, but for Colin Smith, he's really been your primary rebounder. He has been out since Thanksgiving at about 8.5 rebounds per game. You've got Van Allen Lubin, who off of injury has been able to give you about 7.5 rebounds per game. That helps. And Casas Camateros, he's someone that's 6'9". He's able to shoot about 44% from 3-point range. But this San Francisco team just gets up into your grill, and they do a tremendous job with their defense. San Francisco has been one of the better defenses in all of college basketball in terms of the inside, because they've got so many guys that are able to do a nice job down low. Josh Mbakbo has been able to give you about 9.5 boards, 16.5 points per game. And if you look at just points allowed on a per possession basis, this Dons team is currently 17th in the country. Now, Mongolian Mike is not a guy that's really going to be the world's greatest three-point shooter, but at 6'8", he's got so much versatility. 10.5 points, 4 assists. He's a little bit of a point forward out there. Really takes the load off of Marcus Williams and allows him to become a little bit more of a scorer with about 15 points per contest. Got Robbie Beasley, who's been shooting 50% from the outside end. If there is one thing that the Dons need to clean up, it's the fact that they do turn the ball over about 13.5 times per game. They do force 9.5 steals per game, though, and Vanderbilt has really been one of the lesser teams in all of college basketball, being able to force turnovers as well. You don't really have anyone other than Magnon, along with Tyron Lawrence, who, since he's come back, 15 points, steal and a half, 5 boards per contest. They're able to do a lot of that, and with having the Colin Smith injury lingering for Vanderbilt and San Francisco, having size even in their bench with someone like a Stefan Torvik, who's able to do a nice job. At 6'8", is able to pop threes. He's able to give you about 5.5 points per game. Vladislav Morkovsky is someone that stands right around 7'2" if you want to utilize him in tandem with Josh Kunin, who's 6'8" and has been a nice rim protector for the team last few seasons. You're able to do that, and I do think that size of San Francisco, along with the overall defense, going to get it done. Did set my total at a 139.5. Looking at the over because I do think that this game is going to be close enough for late game felling, and Vanderbilt is outside the top 200 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. So this is an ordeal where I'm going to be taking a look at the total over, and San Francisco willing to lay up to 3 with them. 7-11, 7-12 on the betting board. It is Rice. We give our ode to Lane Kiffin. Go Owls. And they are on the road playing against Houston. Houston, a 26 to a 27-point favorite, and your totals between 139.5 and 141. And with Houston, I think that they should be a pretty Bondo-sized favorite, but I think we've went a little bit too far here. I set this line at 24, so I'm going to be taking a look at the points with Rice, and the biggest reason why I am going to be taking a look at the points with Rice is because I do think that the versatility that Max Fiedler brings, even for a defense that is as tremendous as Houston's, is going to be able to give a little bit of fits. You just don't have guys growing on trees are 6'10" that are able to give you 9 points, 9.5 boards, and 5.5 assists per game. I also do think that Travis Evie, a guy that traditionally has been a north of 36% three-point shooter, is going to heat up a little bit more from the outside. This far this season, shooting about 33% from three-point range. We've also got Makai Mason, who's been able to give you about 13.5 points per contest. Would like to see him shoot a bit better than 26.5% from three-point range. I do think that we're going to see a tick up there. Probably not in this game because you are facing up against a Houston team that just absolutely pounds teams into oblivion on defense. They're always at the top of college basketball in terms of rebound rate, and typically three-point shooting defense can be a little bit lucky. With Houston, they year in and year out always find themselves towards the top. Last year, they allowed opponents to shoot 27.9% from three-point range. This year, they're allowing opponents to shoot 27.6% from three. You're able to take a look at that number and think, oh, this is actually halfway representative. And for this Houston team, even though he doesn't necessarily score a ton, gotta love what Jamal Shedd is able to do for this team. He's one of the best floor generals out there in all of college basketball. He just makes winning plays for you. He's been giving out about 6 assists per contest. He chips in their 5+ rebounds. He'll only give you in the neighborhood above 9.5 points per game, but 3 steals per contest is towards the top of all of college basketball. He's a big reason why LJ Cryer, who's shooting 38.5% from 3 with 17 points per game, gets such good looks. Emmanuel Sharp, he has been living up to that name. He has been sharp with about 11.5 points per game, and then you've got the whole being greater than the sum of his parts with guys like Damian Dunn, Terrence Arnoux, who have been able to combine for about 14 points per game. Javier Francois is able to do a solid job down low. I do think that for Rice, they're going to be able to hold in there a little bit more, and for Rice, the big key is they've got to buff up with their defense just a little bit. It's a Rice team that year in and year out, they're outside the top 250 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're currently 310th thus far this season, but if you do take a look at who they've been playing, UC Riverside, Indiana State, New Mexico, they really have been up against it, so I do think that they have suffered a little bit there. And Houston, they haven't necessarily been the world's most battle-tested team, so I do think that the number is starting to get a little bit out of whack, which is why I'm willing to take the points with Rice. Did set them as a 24-point underdog, and did set my total at a 140. I always just bowed a little bit more to the defense, being able to slow things down a little bit more in these sorts of ordeals where you got one bad defense versus one amazing defense. So at a 141, looking at the under, and I'm going to be willing to take the points with Rice. 7-13, 7-14 on the betting board. Illinois State plays host in Northern Kentucky. Northern Kentucky does find themselves as underdogs of between 2.5 and 3 points. Your totals between 134.5 and 135.5, and with Illinois State, did set them as a underdog of 1.5. So I'm going to be taking a look at Northern Kentucky outright on the money line, and big reason why I do like Northern Kentucky is just the backcourt backcourt that you've got with these guys, as you've got one of the more underrated pieces in all of college basketball, in my opinion, in Sam Vincent. He plays very well in tandem with your primary scorer, Marcus Warwick. Marcus Warwick, 18.5 points per game. Last year shot more of about 38.5% from three. This year about 35% from three, and that was as a part of a bottom 40 team in terms of total possessions per game. Meanwhile, Vincent, just a stat sheet stuffer. He gives you about 16 points, 5 boards, 2.5 assists, and each of his 3 years on campus has lent at least 2.1 steals per game as well. Has such a good nose for the ball. Now with Northern Kentucky, what is really hurting them is they no longer have Chris Brandon in the fold. Their top rebounder from a season ago, and as a result, Vincent and his 5.1 rebounds per game, he's the only guy that's giving you north of 5 boards per contest. But I do think that you've got some upside in the Marquette transfer, and Keanon Idejiri. He's a 6'9", little bit of a combo player last season. Just couldn't get out there on the floor for Marquette, but a top 200 recruit that I do think has a lot of upside moving forward. And they go up against an Illinois State team that it's not like they've got amazing size. You've got 2 guys in Miles Foster along Kendall Lewis, who have both been able to supply combined 12.5 rebounds per game, but it's not like they've got overwhelming size. One guy that does is Brandon Lieb, who's been lending 5 rebounds per game, but it's really got no offensive game. Got an Illinois State team that gets really sloppy with it with 14 turnovers per game. I think that Sam Vincent going to be able to take hold of that. You do have balanced scoring with Illinois State. Dalton Banks, Darius Burford are your top 2 scorers. They're both giving you 11 points per contest, but I mean, you've had Darius Burford be a little bit in and out of the fold. He's missed a game or 2 due to injury. You've got some solid depth with Illinois State, but you don't really have that one guy that you can count on towards the back half of the game, and you've really only got one sharpshooter, Johnny Kazinger. He comes over from Old De Pere, Wisconsin. He's been able to shoot 45% from 3-point range, but past that, you don't have a lot from the outside as well. With Northern Kentucky, if they had problems on the inside, I wouldn't be willing to take them here, but this is a spot where I just think that with Northern Kentucky, they are going to be able to force those turnovers and really take Illinois State out of their game. So I do like Northern Kentucky outright on the money line, and what I think is going to be a low-scoring slog. Northern Kentucky over the last 2 seasons has been one of the slowest teams in terms of total possessions per game in all of college basketball. You've got an Illinois State team as a relatively okay defensive team. I'm not going to say that they're amazing. They certainly are far from terrible. And Illinois State, they themselves about 240th in terms of total possessions per game. So did set my total on 131.5, diving in on the under. I'm willing to take Northern Kentucky outright on the money line. 715, 716 on the betting board. It is Texas, and Texas is back to being an underdog on the road against Marquette. Marquette is a favorite of between 7.5 to 8 points, and your total is anywhere between 146.5 and 147. And with Marquette, I did set them as a favorite of 5 points. So I'm going to be willing to take the points with Texas. Texas has been really trying to find themselves a little bit in the backcourt. They brought in a lot of guys via the transfer portal to really be able to elevate this team, and I do think that the pieces are starting to fit together. You've got a nice trio in Ithiel Horton, Max Asmith, and Tyrese Hunter, who have been able to combine for now in the neighborhood about 41.5 points per contest. Asmith and Hunter combining for about 8 assists per game. You've got your designated shooter in Horton, who's shooting 48.5% from 3-point range. But the guy that really I think is going to be able to help hold in this game is Caden Shedrick. He's been playing essentially with one arm. He's been dealing with injury, but he has still given the team, despite that, 14 points, 5 boards, a steal and a half, a block and a half per contest. He's able to pop it from 3-point range. At Texas, they're a mid-tempo team that they turn the ball over about 12 times per game. I like what I'm seeing there now with Marquette. This is a much improved team from a season ago on the defensive side of things. Last year, Marquette was pretty abysmal with their defense, and I will say, they can still be had down low. We saw that in their loss against Wisconsin over the weekend, but for Marquette, in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, they're in the top 50 in the country. Now, it's not going to be a team that's ever going to be like a Houston-style defense, but you'll certainly take that if you're Marquette, as you've got so many guys that are able to go bombs away from 3-point range. Cam Jones, Tyler Kolek, both of these guys shooting north of 42.5% from 3-point range. Jones has been able to give you about 16.5 points per contest. Then on top of that, for Marquette, you have been able to get really good production out of Oso Ogedere, who I do feel like he needs a little bit of help down low, because he's really the only guy that over the last 2 seasons has been able to give you north of 5.5 rebounds per game, but he's been able to do a really good job in his own right, being able to give you a block and a half per contest. So love the way that he's been able to progress his game as well. And for Kolek, just such a really efficient point guard, but you do have a really efficient backcourt in Texas as well. Texas team that looked a little bit out of sorts when they did go to New York City, but I do think that they're going to be able to do a solid job holding up against a Marquette team that has been a little bit slower thus far this season, and it is a Texas team that has been humming with their offense as well, getting to at least 70 points in every single game thus far this season. I do think that this is going to be a game that's going to be played more in the mid to high 140s. I did set my total at 147, so you're at the 146 half. This opened up at 146. Just see a little bit of wiggle room on the over, and with Texas, won't take anything north of 5 with them. 717, 718 on the betting board. It is Clemson, and they play host to South Carolina. South Carolina is a underdog of 8.5 points, and your total is between 139 and 140. And with Clemson, I did set them as a favorite of 7 points. So being able to get north of 8, I am going to be taking a look at the points with South Carolina. It's been a nice run for South Carolina to begin the season, to be undefeated, and both of these teams entering into this rivalry matchup undefeated is not something that I had on my bingo board coming into the season. But for South Carolina, I thought it was really big that they brought in Talon Cooper in the offseason. Just a really efficient point guard that he allows Michi Johnson to be able to play off the ball quite a bit, and that allows him to be able to operate, just be able to take over this offense in general. And you've got a bunch in Clemson that certainly has been cooking with regards to their versatility in PJ Hall. Hall, 21.5 points, 7.5 boards, shooting 42.5% from three-point range. And for Clemson as a whole, they're shooting north of 40% from three-point range. South Carolina shooting north of 40% from three-point range. Now, I do think that both of these teams are going to taper off a little bit in terms of this three-point shooting percentage. And both of these teams are outside the top 225 in terms of total possessions per game, but you are staring at two of the more efficient offenses in all of college basketball. And reason why I still do take a look at the over, even though I do think that this three-point shooting is going to regress with both of these teams, is, for one, neither of these teams really generates a lot of turnovers. And for two, you have a situation where I do think that this is going to be a game close enough for late game filling. As I did set my number at a 7, you do have a Clemson team that they have given up at least 68 points in each of their last 4 games. For South Carolina, they've given up 67 plus points in 3 out of their last 4 games, so these teams are still giving up some points. Now, for South Carolina, the biggest thing is that they're going to have a tough time down low. Ian Scheffelen being able to log about 9.5 rebounds per game for Clemson is absolutely massive for them, and you don't have a single player on the South Carolina team that's able to give you north of 5 rebounds per game, though. You do have B.J. Mack along with Miles Dute, pair of guys with north of 6'6" size that do have versatility. Mack to be able to give you 17 points on 38.5% three-point shooting. Dute to be able to shoot 39% from 3 with about 4 boards per contest. And for South Carolina, every single player on the roster that's made at least 1 3 is shooting at least 36.4% from three-point range. That is just absolutely insane. And then for Clemson, you've got Joe Girard right now shooting 46% from the outside with 14.5 points per game. And he and Chance Hunter are combining to only turn the ball over about 2.5 times per game. They've been really efficient while doling out 7 assists per game, but it is a Clemson team that can be a little bit more top-heavy. I would like to see a little bit more out of someone like a Jack Clark, and I do think that for South Carolina, they're going to hold in this game, and I do think that because they hold in this game close enough to their being late game fouling, that we are going to be able to get an over in this spot. So I did set my total at 141, looking at the over, and with Clemson, did make them a 7-point favorite, so taking the points with South Carolina. 719, 720 on the betting board. It is Omaha, and they hit the road face-off against Texas Tech. Texas Tech finds themselves as a favorite of 20 to 20.5 points, and your totals between 143 and 144, and with Texas Tech, set them as a favorite of 24.5 points. So I'm going to be willing to lay this number. It's an Omaha team that, in general, has been absolutely brutal with their defense the last few seasons, and I do think that brutality on defense is certainly going to be continuing against a Texas Tech team that they're looking to play slower than they have in the past. They bring in Grant McCaslin, one of the great defensive tacticianers that we've got in college basketball as of right now. He was the main man over at North Texas the last few seasons, and for Texas Tech, they're just going to be able to outsize Omaha. You've got 7-footer Warren Washington, who's able to give you about 7.5 rebounds per game. Texas Tech does need to clean things up with the 12 turnovers per game, but you've got Joe Toussaint, does a nice job doling it out with 4.3 assists to 1.6 turnovers per game. Pop Isaacs is really the guy that does need to take care of those 3 turnovers that he has been committing, and he's only shooting about 26% from three-point range, but I love the game of Darion Williams. Comes in from Nevada, 6'6". He just makes winning plays, 1.3 steals, 9.5 points, 7.5 rebounds per game, so love the way that he's able to stuff the stat sheet. And then for Omaha, you're relying a lot on Frankie Fiddler to be the main man, as he's been able to log about 14 points per game and shooting 36.5% from 3. And Omaha only about 10.5 turnovers per game. They shoot 35.5% from three-point range, but Markel Sutton is right now the only guy that's giving you north of 5.5 rebounds per game. Fiddler's the only guy that gives you north of 10 points per contest as well. And for Omaha, they do find themselves with a 5-4 record. 3 of those wins have come against non-Division I competition, though. Recognize that they play Lindenwood and Air Force tough, but for Omaha, this is very much a record that is built on sand. Actually, 4 of these wins have come against non-Division I competition, so their numbers have been greatly overinflated. You've got a Texas Tech team coming off of giving up 103 to Butler, but that was a game that went to overtime. Prior to that, they had given up 70 points or fewer in 3 of their last 4 games. I do think that for Omaha, with their last game against a Division I opponent coming on November 19th, I think that they're in for a very, very rude awakening. I set Texas Tech as a 24.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. I think that for Omaha, they're going to have a very tough time getting anything going whatsoever on the offensive side of things, as well as the step up in competition. I think is really going to affect them. So, going to be taking a look at the under. So, I told 134.5. I think the Grant McCaslin goes back to slow, grimy basketball, and I'm going to be willing to lay the number with Texas Tech. 721, 722 on the betting board. Northern Arizona, it's a road to face off against Abilene Christian. Abilene Christian is a favorite of 7 to 7.5 points, with your total between 138 to 139.5. For Abilene Christian, typically this is a team that does a really good job of generating a bunch of turnovers. They've done a little bit less of that this season, but the defense has still been rock solid, and I am going to be willing to lay it with Abilene Christian. Typically for Abilene Christian, this is a team that leaves themselves very susceptible to the three ball, and they're still not an amazing three-point shooting defense at 187th, but last year they allowed opponents to shoot 38.1% from three. That's down to 33.1% this season, so a marked improvement there, and they are going up against a Northern Arizona team that, without Carson Tout, this team has been rudderless and lost, to say the least. And now for Abilene Christian, while they're going up against a Northern Arizona team that needs a little bit more out of Oakland Ford, who's been able to give you about 7 to 8 points per game, you just want to see a little bit more in terms of facilitation with this bunch as well, because with Tout, he was not only their top rebounder from a season ago with about 8 rebounds per game, and I still don't know what's happened with him, because I was thinking that he was going to be in the fold. He has yet to be seen thus far this season, but without him, now you've got pretty much Liam Lloyd having to do a little bit of everything. 8 points, 5.5 boards, 4.5 assists, and at 6'5", he's done an admirable job of being able to fill in, but this is a Northern Arizona team that, as a result, they've been turning the ball over 14 times per game. They're not a good three-point shooting team to start with. They're shooting only about 29.5% from the outside, and on an Abilene Christian team where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Each of your top 3 scorers also give you 4+ rebounds per game, with Ali Abdul-Diba, Hunter Joe Men, along with Arion Simmons, all being able to combine for in the neighborhood of about 39 to 40 points per contest, and Madden shooting 46% from 3. It's an Abilene Christian team that they themselves are turning the ball over right around 13 times per game. You'd like to see them clean that up, but they're still generating about 15.5 turnovers per game. It's not quite the same as it has been in past years, but it is still pretty rock solid with this Abilene Christian team as well. They've been able to do a relatively solid job of not allowing as many second chances as they have in past years as well. When you're able to come at teams with waves like they are able to, with guys like Emmanuel Allen, Cameron Steele, being able to contribute about 6 to 7 points per contest, and Steele now shooting 45.5% from three-point range. I think that those different looks really going to take it out of a Northern Arizona team that's riding high after their win against Pacific, but prior to that, it had been a very rough go of it for them as they had given up 69+ points in 4 of their last 5 games, and you've got a Abilene Christian team that, in regulation, they have been one of the better defenses out there with 71 points or fewer surrendered in 4 of their last 5 games. So I did set my total at 145. I do think that for this Northern Arizona team, they're just overall lack of efficiency on the defensive side of things is going to get the best of them. I think that Abilene Christian does a good job turning defense into offense, as Abilene Christian, they themselves have gotten to at least 69 points so far their last 5 games. So looking at the over, and with Abilene Christian, want to lay up to 10.5 with them. 723, 724 on the betting board. Fort Wayne, IPFW, they are going to be on the road facing off against Southern Indiana. Southern Indiana finds themselves as an underdog of 6 points, and your totals between 147.5 to 149.5, and with Southern Indiana, I did set them as an underdog of 7 points. I'm going to be willing to lay this number with Fort Wayne. By the way, I still have no idea whatsoever how in the world Southern Indiana had a lead at the half against Duke about a week and a half or 2 weeks ago, but that's sometimes the weirdness of college basketball. Now they have to go up against a Fort Wayne team that's really doing a nice job of being able to fire all cylinders on offense. Still leaves a little bit of something to be desired on defense, but the D2 transfer and Rasheed Bello comes in from UW Parkside, has been amazing. 15 points, 4.5 assists, shoots 35% from 3, was one of the best players at the Division II level last season, and he's really elevated this Fort Wayne team that typically has a tough time taking care of the ball. Just 9.9 turnovers per game. Fort Wayne always a relatively solid three-point shooting team, and they're even better this year than they have been in past years, shooting 40.7% from three-point range. The duo of Quentin Morton Robinson and Maximus Nelson, these two guys are shooting north of 51% from distance. Morton Robinson, 3 assists, 13.5 points per game. Nelson is able to give you 8.5 points per contest. Now, if you got a little bit of an Achilles heel for Fort Wayne, you've only got one guy giving you north of 5 rebounds per game. Eric Mulder has been able to give you about 6.5 boards per contest, but Southern Indiana is not doing an amazing job down low either. You do have A.J. Smith, who's been able to log about 9.5 rebounds, 10.5 points per game. He's the only guy that's able to give you north of 4.6 rebounds per game. Cupboard was very bare for Southern Indiana coming into the season. season. They've lost each of their top 5 scorers from last season, including their top rebounder, Jacob Polakovic. Polakovic was logging right in the neighborhood of about 12.5 rebounds per game. He was the top 5 player in all of college basketball in terms of rebounds per game. And him being out of the fold just leaves this team at a complete loss. As last year, Southern Indiana bombed it from 3. This year, they're shooting 32% from 3-point range. You do have a 47% 3-point shooter in Jack Milkey, who's been able to do a nice job being able to put in there about 9 points per game. But that's about all that you've gotten from the outside. And I do think that for Southern Indiana, the fact that they are turning the ball over 14 times per game, they're really looking for answers from a team that's completely gutted from a season ago. They're going to take it on the chin against a Fort Wayne team that has been absolutely incredible with their offense, 75-plus points in 4 of their last 5 games. Meanwhile, you got a Southern Indiana team that scored 62 points or fewer in each of their last 3 games against a D1 opponent. So this is a spot where I did set Fort Wayne as a 7-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number, and I did set my total at a 147. Fort Wayne really bombing it from 3-point range, but I just don't think that Southern Indiana does their part with this north of 148 total. So going to be taking a look at the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay it with Fort Wayne. 725, 726 on the betting board. St. Thomas plays host to Milwaukee. UW Milwaukee, 5.5 to a 6-point underdog. Tonight's game is the same between 141.5 to 142. UW Milwaukee, in terms of mid-major basketball, has been one of the bigger disappointments as far this season. They brought back so many pieces from a season ago, including their top guy in B.J. Freeman, but B.J. Freeman just can't do it all by himself. He has been trying to. 19.5 points, 5.5 boards, 1.7 steals per contest, shooting 38% from 3, but everyone else around him is really not shooting it well from 3. You don't have anyone else that averages north of 5.5 points per game, shooting above 33% from the outside. Milwaukee has still done a nice job taking care of the ball with only about 10.5 turnovers per game, but they're shooting a piddly 40% from the floor with Kentrell Pullian, your next top scorer after B.J. Freeman, with about 9 points, 5.5 boards per contest, and Freeman and Pullian are the only 2 guys that are logging north of 4.5 rebounds per game. Now, the good news is they go up against the St. Thomas team that, let's call it what it is, they don't necessarily have a ton of size. You got Parker Jorklin has been able to give you about 5 rebounds per game, along with Ben and Kawasinski. These 2 guys, they both give you 5 rebounds per game apiece. And for St. Thomas, name of the game for them is slow efficiency. St. Thomas, since they've come up to the D1 ranks, they've always ranked outside the top 275 in terms of total possessions per game. They're always a bottom 100 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but they do a nice job taking care of the ball. They only turn it over 10.5 times per game this far this season. They've always been a top 75 team in terms of 3-point shooting percentage. They're shooting 36% from 3-point range, including 43% out of Raheem Anthony, who's been able to give you 11 points per game. He's really been able to step up in a big way, but I do take a look at what you've got in this St. Thomas team, and I do think that they should be able to match up quite well down low with UW Milwaukee, but I do think that the elevator of B.J. Freeman is going to be able to keep this team lively, and I do think that UW Milwaukee being able to get a little bit more out of someone like a Marquise Browning, who a season ago was able to log about 3 assists per contest. That's going to be able to help out a Milwaukee team that has been looking for an identity outside of B.J. Freeman. I think that Milwaukee holds in this game, and I do think that both of these teams fire on all cylinders offensively, but I just don't think you get enough possessions to go over in this game. Milwaukee has really slowed down their tempo after they were a top 50 team in all of college basketball in terms of possessions per game a season ago. So I did set my total at 136.5, diving in on the under. And with St. Thomas, made them 4.5 point favorites, so we'll take 5+ with UW Milwaukee. 727, 728 on the betting board. UW Green Bay, it's a road face-off against SIU Edwardsville, and old Edwardsville finds themselves as a favorite between 6 and 6.5 points. Total is 128, and with Edwardsville, I set them as a 10.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. With UW Green Bay, they've actually really risen up with their defense, but they're still not necessarily that efficient on the defensive side of things. They're about 160th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. You've got 2 bottom 50 teams in terms of total possessions per game, so this is going to be a low-scoring slog, in my opinion. And when it comes to this Edwardsville team, I just absolutely love the fact that you've got the Wright brothers, who both have size and versatility. Both of these guys stand right around 6'6", 6'7", and they're able to launch from 3. Now, I will say for Edwardsville, they've been quite inefficient on defense themselves. They're right around about 290th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. After a season ago, they were a top 125 team. With that regard, I do think that we're going to see a little bit of a rise up. You've got Jamar Wright, who's been the top scorer for this team, to be able to log about 16.5 points per game on 36.5% 3-point shooting, and then Lamar only about 11 points per contest, but he's shooting 47.5% from 3 for an Edwardsville Edwardsville team that, as a whole, they shoot 38% from the outside. If you had DeMarco Minor, be very major down low with about 9.5 rebounds per game. They've got size, but outside of Minor, they don't really have a lot of rebounding. Would like to see a little bit more out of Terrence Thomas, who's 6'8". He's been able to give the team right around 5.5 points, 4 boards per contest. But for UW Milwaukee, outside of Elijah Jones, you don't have really any sort of rebounding for the team either. Nobody else gives you north of 5 boards per contest. You've had Noah Reynolds be a nice takeover scorer, and this guy is putting up numbers: 17.5 points, 4.5 boards, 5.5 assists. But the entire offense runs through him. It's a Green Bay team that's very slow, and they turn the ball over 14 times per game because they have to have Reynolds do a little bit of everything. You need Foster Wonder to be able to take the load off, as he's averaging 8 points per game, but he literally does not have a steal, a block, or an assist this year while shooting 42% from 3. Talk about a designated scorer. That's pretty much what you've got right there. And for UW Green Bay, certainly has been a nice rise up in terms of their defense. This is a bunch that has now given up 58 points or fewer in 3 of their last 5 games. Meanwhile, for SIU Edwardsville, they have been able to bump up their offense a little bit as well. So it'll be 4+ points in 3 of their last 4 games. So there's a little bit of situation of something's got to give. But I just feel like with Edwardsville, you've got a few more moving pieces with the Wright brothers having all the experience that they do have playing in tandem. I do think that it's going to be a little bit too much for UW Green Bay to overcome. I did set my total at a 130.5. Green Bay playing a little bit of better offense than they did a season ago. And for Edwardsville, they have been shockingly rough with regards to their defense as well, so I'm going to be taking a look at the over. Both Edwardsville willing to lay up to 10 with them. 729, 730 on the betting board. It is Northern Iowa. They play us a Richmond. The Itsy Bitsy Spiders find themselves as a 1 to 1.5 point underdog with your total between 142 and 143.5. With Northern Iowa, I did set them as a 2-point favorite. Not willing to lay anything more than the 1.5, but going to be willing to lay that 1.5. With Richmond, this team has been able to do a nice job with Jordan King really lighting it up from the outside. The King has been the king for this bunch, as he's been able to put in there 17+ points per contest from 3-point range, shooting north of 40% from 3, and as a matter of fact, for King, closer to 21 points per game with what we've seen recently out of him. And got good versatility with Neil Quinn: 14 points, 6 boards, 4 assists, block and a half per contest for a Richmond team that is turning the ball over 7.4 times per game. I'm pretty sure that is the lowest mark in all of college basketball. Isaac Bigelow has done a nice job being able to give this team some scoring as well, but they are dealing with a little bit of an injury to Delani Honda, and it is a very top-heavy Richmond team that, even though you play like 8 or 9 guys in the rotation, you pretty much have 4 or 5 guys that give you north of 9 points per game, and guys like Jason Roche and company are pretty much backup singers. Meanwhile, for Northern Iowa, they need to buckle up a little bit more down low. Nathan Heisey, Titan Anderson, these are guys with a little bit of versatility that'll be able to give you about 11.5 rebounds per game, but I feel like they should be getting more down low out of Jacob Hudson. He had 6'11", 250. It's given the team only about 4.5 rebounds per game, was a little bit more of an ancillary piece the last few seasons, and he's been seeing more and more minutes as the season has went along. If he's able to progress, that's going to be massive for a Northern Iowa team that I fully expect them to get more out of Bowen Bourne moving forward. He has been a giant disappointment thus far this season. For Bowen Bourne, last season he had 18 points per game, shot 36.5% from 3. He has to be playing with injury or something. He missed a game a little bit earlier in the season. He's been now able to score double figures in 3 of the last 4 games, but it's been really touch and go with him. I do think that he's getting back to a little bit of floor health though, as he scored 17 points in the team's last game, and you do have a lot of guys that just in general contribute for Northern Iowa. Someone like a Michael Duex last season had 10 points, 5 boards. He's down to about 5 points per game this season, but I think that he's going to be able to find it for Northern Iowa. They do shoot about 35% from 3-point range. I do think that this is going to be a rather controlled game in terms of the amount of possessions that you get. Northern Iowa, when they were really at their peak, they were playing slow and controlled. They're now a mid-tempo team, which I don't understand the tempo shift. They were always very good when they played very slowly, but you know that Richmond is not going to be looking to bump up the tempo themselves. 282nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. So here at the 1 to 1.5, 1 to lay with Northern Iowa, and I did set my total at a 142. I think we come up just short on this total with the way that Richmond does play it a bit slower. So going to be taking a look at the under and going to be willing to ride with Northern Iowa on the sight line. 731, 732 on the betting board. It is UC Santa Barbara, and they play us in New Mexico. New Mexico is a 12 to a 12.5 point favorite with your total between 156.5 and 158. Set this line at 10. I'm going to be willing to ride with the Gauchos. Was very impressed by what I saw when I faded New Mexico over the weekend, as this team now has Jalen House back in the fold, and forget about mid-major players. This guy is just one of the best players in all of college basketball. He plays very well in tandem with Donovan Dent. Dent has been able to really step up with the injuries to House and Mashburn thus far this season. 16.5 points, 7 assists per game, shooting 36.5% from three-point range. Jamal Mashburn Jr. has been out of the full last 3 games, and I would expect him to be out once again, but with having House back, that's just so big. He's only played 3 games thus far this season, but when he was out there for a full season last year, 17 points, 4.5 assists, 2.7 steals per game, really just elevates everyone around him for this New Mexico team, a team that does have a pair of guys in JT Toppin and Nelly Jr. Joseph, combining for 15 rebounds per game. You've got good versatility with them. Even though they don't pop threes, they're able to run the floor quite well. But for UC Santa Barbara, I feel like this team is getting a little bit undervalued because they had a few games that messed up their metrics when they were without A.J. Mitchell. And with A.J. Mitchell back at the fold, he's been back for 4 games. How about 23.5 points per game, 4.3 boards, 4.3 assists on 50% three-point shooting? UC Santa Barbara is currently undefeated when he hits the floor at 4-0. Their 2 losses both came when he was out of it. So I think that is very important. Would like to see a little bit more rebounding out of 6'11" Yohan Traore. He comes in from Auburn, 15 points, 4 boards, does a very solid job on the offensive side of things. Defense has been a little bit of a work in progress for a UC Santa Barbara team that they typically are one of your better teams in all of college basketball. And we have noticed with UC Santa Barbara, they have been bumping up their tempo just a little bit as they're right around 154th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. You always know that New Mexico, under Mr. Patino, they are going to be playing very up-tempo. They're 44th in the country with this regard. So it is an interesting spot. I do think that with Santa Barbara, having back A.J. Mitchell has helped out this defense a little bit. And New Mexico is actually playing a little bit of defense themselves. I'm not saying that this is going to be a team that is going to be looking like vintage Virginia or anything like that, but for New Mexico, in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, 22nd in the country. So I do feel like this total is set too high. I did set my total at a 150. I'm going to be diving in on the under, but I do think that the Santa Barbara team getting a little bit undervalued with Mitchell back in the fold. Set my line at 10, so going to be taking double figures with UC Santa Barbara and the under. 733, 734 on the betting board. It is Dayton, and Dayton is going to be playing us UNLV. UNLV finds themselves as a underdog of between 8 and 8.5 points, and your totals between 135.5 and 137. I did set Dayton as a 9.5 point favorite, so this is a spot where I'm going to be willing to lay it with them. With Dayton, I do think that Dayron Holmes is certainly going to be able to do some damage down low against a UNLV team that it just feels like they're trying to find their identity a little bit. As for UNLV, you've gotten some nice production out of Caleb Boone with about 14 points, 5 boards, and each of your top 3 scorers for UNLV give you 5+ rebounds per game. Nobody else really gives you north of 3.8 rebounds per contest. Isaiah Cottrello came in from West Virginia a few seasons ago, has not really been able to find it in this offense. You've got one guy that really does a nice job of being the trigger man in Denton Thomas Jr. He's really become a nice point guard at 5.8 assists per contest as a true freshman, but this team in general is looking for answers. You've had Jalen Hill, who was a starter at Oklahoma last year. I mean, he's been fine, but you expect a little bit more than right around about 12 to 13 points, 5 to 6 rebounds. I thought he'd be able to tear it up a little bit more with the team, with Daron Holmes now popping threes for the Satan team, not giving you as much rebounding because he's got a little bit more help down low. That is going to be a little bit of a tough battle for this UNLV team to be able to win, because with Daron Holmes last year, he had to be the main rim protector. Now he's able to operate a little bit more along the perimeter with Nate Santos tipping in about 7.5 rebounds per game, and then you're able to couple that with Kobe Elvis, who has done a masterful job filling in for Malachi Smith, having an assist-to-turnover ratio that is north of 3. Dayton, a very controlled team, bottom 40 in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but shooting 39% from three-point range with Kobe Brea, shooting 48% from the outside. He's able to log about 12.5 points per game. Love the fact that you bring in Javon Bennett from Merrimack, who's been able to up and do some few more steals as well. And for this UNLV team, with them not being able to get the amount of turnovers that they were able to a season ago, it's led to their defense being a little bit on the decline, giving up 70-plus points in each of their last 3 games. Meanwhile, this Dayton team, I believe that the only game that they have given up north of 70 thus far this season was against St. John's. I do think that Dayton gets a little bit more of a slower, grimier game in this one. I set my total 135.5, diving in on the under with Dayton. Going to be willing to lay up to 9 with them. 735, 736 on the betting board. It is San Diego in the road face-off against Utah State. Utah State is a favorite of between 15.5 to 16.5 points. The on this game is 143.5. San Diego, I said, as a 14-point underdog. I like this Utah State team. I'm feeling more and more bullish on them. with every passing game, but I do think that this number has gotten a little bit out of whack. You have a San Diego bunch that has a guy in the backcourt and Wayne McKinney III, who I really do like. He's been able to give the team 13.5 points, 3 assists per game. Certainly doesn't compare to the assist to turnover ratio of 7 that you've currently got with Darius Brown. He followed his coach Danny Sprinkle on over from Montana State, and he has been absolutely masterful, shooting 38.5% from 3, 10 points, 8 assists, and it's just hard to be much more precise than he has been. He's had a combined 4 turnovers over the course of the last 5 games, and great Osabor going to be able to win that battle down low. He has been a bore down low, 20.5 points, 9.5 rebounds per game. But Kevin Patton on the flip side for San Diego, it's been a nice surprise as a freshman. 9.6 boards. It's a San Diego team that they are turning the ball over about 14 times per contest. And for San Diego, it's not saying much, but the defense is a little bit better than it was a season ago. Last year, they were a bottom 5 team in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Steve Lavin has these guys now 53rd in the country, which I'm not saying it's amazing or anything like that, but boy, that is much better than it was a season ago. And it's right on par with Utah State, who's about 55th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. With this Utah State team, you certainly have more scoring options and certainly have much more downloads. Ken Patton is right now the only guy for San Diego that is logging north of 5 rebounds per game. But we have seen in the step-up games, San Diego against Hawaii, they give up 77. Against Stanford, they give up 88. So they've been the beneficiaries of some weaker competition. And for this Utah State team, they certainly have stepped up with their offense with 79 plus points in 4 of their last 5 games. But I do think that San Diego being just a little bit disrespected, I feel like this is a team that is a little bit better than maybe we do want to give them credit for. Now, I do think that defensive efficiency rating is going to be going northward. I pointed out at what they've done in step-up games, but I think that San Diego is going to be able to hit enough shots to be able to remain lively in this one. So I did set my line at 14. I'm going to be willing to take the points with San Diego, and also did make my total 150. So going in on the over, and I'm going to be taking the points with San Diego. 737, 738 on the betting board. Nevada plays host to UC Davis. UC Davis finds themselves as a underdog of 14.5 to 15.5 points. Your total on this game is 142 to 143, and with Nevada, I did set them as a pretty sizable favorite here of 13.5 points. So seeing what we got right now with Nevada being about a 14.5 to a 15.5 point favorite, I think we've gone just a little bit too far. I like this Nevada team. I do think that they're one of the most disciplined teams in all of college basketball. They were one of the best teams in the country last year in terms of their free throw shooting percentage. They do a nice job of not really hurting themselves, but they are having to go up against a UC Davis team that has one of the most gifted scorers in all of college basketball. That would be Elijah Pepper. Pepper has been peppering in there 20.5 points, 4.5 boards, 40% three-point shooter. Had a little bit of a clunker in the team's game against Oregon State their last time out, but 22-plus points in 4 of the team's last 5 games. He's gotten a little bit of help down low with Adbayo, who's been able to give you about 5.5 rebounds per game, and that is one place where Nevada can be had. Nevada does a good job in terms of team rebounding, but they don't necessarily have that one guy that does an amazing job pounding it down low with being able to get about 10.5 points, 6.3 rebounds out of Nick Davidson. You've also been getting a little bit out of Jazz Gardner recently with about 6 points, 4 boards per contest, but for Nevada, it's just all about keeping it disciplined, shooting 77% the free throw line, 8 turnovers per game. They shoot in the mid-30s from 3 with their main versatile player, Keenan Blackshear. Last year, he shot 3s, but didn't necessarily shoot them well. This season, he has not made a single 3, but how about 16.5 points, 6 boards, 5 assists per game, and then their top scorer, Jared Lucas. He does a great job just being able to mix up the defense. You need him to play man-to-man, he does. You need him to play zone, he does. He's been able to throw in their 18 points per contest, and while the UC Davis team is a little bit top-heavy, I do like what they've been able to get as well out of Ty Johnson, who's been able to give you 13.5 points per game as well for UC Davis. A big key for them being able to cut down on the 16.5 turnovers per game, but with Nevada, they really don't do a great job of being able to steal away the ball, which I do think is going to bode well for a UC Davis team that has really seen a downtick in terms of their tempo thus far this season. For UC Davis last year, they were top 100 team in terms of total possessions per game. This year, they have played significantly more slowly, and for Nevada, they are an incredibly efficient offense that has scored at least 77 points in 4 out of their last 5 games. So this is a little bit of a situation of something's got to give. I do think that UC Davis might go back to their roots of playing a little bit more fast, and I do think that Elijah Pepper and his scoring keeps this Davis team in it. So I am willing to take 14 plus with UC Davis, and did set my total 145.5. So going over and going to be taking the points with UC Davis. 739, 740 on the betting board. It is Minnesota, and they play us to Nebraska. The state with the smallest strengths in the union, Minnesota, finds themselves as an underdog of 1.5 to 2.5 points. So it's between 147 to 148. I did set Minnesota as a underdog of 4 points, so I'm going to be willing to lay it with Nebraska. Nebraska certainly has the stigma around them now of having lost that game to Creighton by just 100 billion points, and a lot of people are going to be calling into question whether or not their good start was a flash in the pan or not. But I do think that this is a different Nebraska team than we've seen in past years, and the biggest reason why is Rienk Mast and all that he's able to do. How about 9.5 boards, 14 points per game at 6'10". He's able to fire in threes with about a 32 to 33% clip from three-point range. On top of that, you've also been able to get a lot down low in terms of the right around about 14.5 points, 6 boards out of Juwan Gary as well for Nebraska. They also do a nice job of being able to take care of the ball. 9.5 turnovers per game. They really overhauled that backcourt. They've got Casey Shomanaga. It's pretty much a designated scorer, and a lot of guys they're able to help distribute. And for Minnesota, just all about the Dawson Garcia show. And Dawson Garcia, 20.5 points, 8 boards, 2.5 assists. You absolutely love his game, but it is a Minnesota team that they are turning the ball over right around 14 times per contest, and the biggest reason why is you've got high variance guys that come in via the transfer portal. You have Elijah Hawkins, who last year at Howard was able to log 13 points, 6 assists per game, but led all of college basketball in terms of turnovers per game while shooting 46% from three-point range. Mike Mitchell comes in for Pepperdine, where he shot 44% from 3, 10.5 points per game, but he was also a part of one of the worst defenses in all of college basketball as well. So you've got your shortfalls when it comes to this backcourt. For Nebraska, you've had Jaquez Lawrence actually be the top facilitator for the team with 3 assists per game. As for Nebraska, they just do a really good job as a collective of having versatility and having a lot of guys dole it out. They don't necessarily have that one guy that's going to have the ball in his hands a ton, but you've got 4 separate guys. That includes the transfers in Bryce Williams along with Jerron Coleman. I'll give you at least 2.4 assists per game, and Williams has been able to shoot about 42% from three-point range himself. So I do think that for Nebraska, they just have too many weapons in this ordeal. I do think that it's going to be very difficult for Minnesota to be able to hold in there with their turnover woes, and for Nebraska, they really have slowed down their tempo after at the beginning of the Fred Hoiberg era. This was a team that was just running it and gunning it for all of mankind, and with this Nebraska team as well, been highly impressed with the way that they've guarded the arc this year, with opponents shooting 28% from 3. So did set my total at 142. I think that Nebraska slows this game down, so looking at the under end, going to be one to lay with Nebraska, made them a 4-point favorite. 741, 742 on the betting board. West Virginia plays us at Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh finds themselves as a 2.5 to a 3-point favorite, and your total between 140 and 141.5. And with Pittsburgh, I did set them as a favorite of 2.5 points. So at the 3, that is my buy point on West Virginia. This is a backyard brawl. This is just a big, giant rivalry in general, and I do think that West Virginia going to be up to the task. Now, they're still without Kirk Kreese, so he's going to be out for another game or two, but Quinn Slesniski has really been a versatile player with 16.5 points, 5 boards, shooting 37.5% from three-point range. This guy has done nothing but pound nails. Meanwhile, got Jesse Edwards, who's able to give you about 2 blocks per game down low. And for Pittsburgh, I feel like their early season hot start was a flash in the pan, because in their step-up games, we have seen it. They get destroyed by Florida by 15 points, they lose at home to Missouri, and then they take it on the chin to Clemson. Meanwhile, in their games against the likes of Jacksonville, North Carolina A&T, they absolutely beat up on them, and I really do think that Carlton Carrington is a real deal. Had a triple-double in his first game of his college basketball career, 14.5 points, 5.5 boards, 6 assists, shooting 36.5% from 3, but just need more to help out Blake Hinson. Hinson has been amazing. He's about 6'8", shooting 42.5% from 3. He's able to give you about 5 boards per contest, but you've got Frederico. Frederico has been primarily a low post defender. He's able to give you 2 blocks per contest. Carrington does a good job of being able to dole out the ball, but just have a shortage of guards after that. Ishmael Legette has been able to give you about 15 points per game, but he's not necessarily a guy that's going to be doling out the ball too much. And the big key for West Virginia, getting a little bit more of their tempo, as they've been playing at a bottom 50 rate in terms of total possessions per game at this point without having Kirk Kreese in the fold. They do have to play a little bit more slowly just because they don't have a lot of depth. West Virginia, an okay perimeter shooting team. If they're able to hold down Pittsburgh from the outside, that's going to be big, because Jesse Edwards can win that fight down low, and Quinn Slesniski has a little bit of size. And this is a Pittsburgh team that, if you take a look at the raw numbers, they're pretty impressive. 25th in the country in terms of bonus 3-point shooting percentage. Again, a lot of that is because of the competition that they played. Meanwhile, with West Virginia, even though it's been a rough start to the season, they have challenged themselves a little bit more, and I do think that this is going to be a rivalry that comes down to the bitter end. Getting 3 or more, going to be willing to take the points with West Virginia. I do think that they execute their style and just making this game very slow and being able to get this more under control. So I'm going to be taking a look at the under to go along with the points with West Virginia. 743, 744 on the betting board. You've got DePaul, and they are going to be on the road facing off against Texas A&M. A&M finds themselves as a favorite of between 18 to 18.5 points, and your total between 146 and 146.5, and I did set my total at 139. I'm going to be taking a look at the under. Got a Texas A&M team that has been dealing with quite a few injuries. I know that Henry Coleman along with Therese Radford have been in and out of the fold recently. And I think that you should be good to go on Coleman. Radford is right now the more questionable of the two, but even with those guys out, you still have a lot of depth with this team. Texas A&M, when they want to, they're able to go about 9 or so deep, and you've got that primary scorer in Wade Taylor IV, who's been able to log about 18.5 points per game, 4.4 assists. Now, he does turn the ball over a little bit too much, but this is not a DePaul team that's necessarily done a great job in any aspect. They're only generating about 5 steals per game. They're turning the ball over themselves about 15 times per contest as well. DePaul's leaving themselves wide back open from three-point range, 265th in the country. In terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, I will say for Texas A&M, they're about 205th in this category. And the one thing that DePaul has done an okay job of, they're currently shooting about 37.5% from three-point range. They bring in Chico Carter, who in every single stop in his college basketball career, whether that be South Carolina, Murray State, what have you, he's been a north of 40% three-point shooter. He's been able to give the team double figures thus far this season, but you just need a little bit more, I guess you call it rhyme and reason with this offense. Chico Carter has never been a primary ball handler, and he's had to have the ball in his hands a lot this season. You don't have a single guy for DePaul as well. Give you north of 4.3 rebounds per game. With Texas A&M, you've got Coleman, who's been able to give you 9 boards per contest, and then on top of that, you've got Solomon Washington, along with Radford when he is out there, both giving you about 5 boards per contest. You've been able to get about 7.5 rebounds per game out of Anderson Garcia. Texas A&M should be able to absolutely punk DePaul down low. You've also got an A&M team that's doing a nice job taking care of the ball, only about 10 turnovers per game out of them. You've been able to get a little bit of additional scoring with 8 points and about 39.5% three-point shooting out of Hayden Hefner. You've got tons of depth with this A&M team, and DePaul, they will give you different looks, just none of the looks are any good. And for this DePaul bunch, it's just been an all-over-the-place season for them with their lone win coming against South Dakota. Meanwhile, you've got a Texas A&M team that has been able to do a pretty remarkable job on defense, allowing 70 points or fewer in 4 of their last 6 games. I think that DePaul just going to be stuck in the mud in this one. I set my total at 139.5. Diving in on the under with Texas A&M starting to get back to full staff, I was willing to lay the number here, set them as a 19.5 point favorite. So laying it with Texas A&M and taking a look at the under. 745, 746 on the betting board. Denver hits the road face-off against Colorado State. Colorado State, a 21.5 to a 22.5 point favorite. And your total between 162 and 163.5. Set my total at a 154. I'm going to be willing to dive in on the under with Denver. Are they an efficient defensive team? Oh, heck no, they are not. But it's also not a team that's playing at some sort of warp speed. 144th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. And Colorado State, for as efficient as they are, I just don't think that they're going to be in a game that sees enough possessions for this total to be able to get north of 160, just because they're right around 200th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. You've got a Denver bunch that has been able to get quite a bit of production out of Tommy Bruner. 23.5 points per game. He's one of the best scorers in all of college basketball. Top 5 in the country in terms of points per game, shooting 46.5% from three-point range. And then Tekuta Nemo has really been your main man down low, 19 points, 9 boards per contest, but it is a very top-heavy team. After that, you really don't have anyone else that gives you north of 9.5 points per game with Jackson Branchley along with Bruner. These two guys combined for about 6.8 assists per game, and Denver's only turning the ball over 9 times per game, so credit where credit is due, but you've got a Denver team that also has been playing some cupcake competition. They have played in their last 4 games, 2 games against non-D1 teams, and the other 2 games were against Texas A&M, Commerce, and Idaho, and their games against D1 competition, they scored 71 or fewer in both of those. Meanwhile, you've got a Colorado State team that they're lauded for all that they're able to do on the offensive side of things. How about if we give a little bit of love to the defense, though? We saw them completely hold down Creighton. Granted, they caught Creighton on the right day. They were just as cold as an igloo with that regard, but Colorado State, they've been able to do a much better job giving up about 7 points fewer per 100 possessions than they did a season ago, and you've got the best floor general out there in Isaiah Stevens, really perhaps in all of college basketball. 17 points, 8 assists, 2.5 turnovers per game while shooting 46.5% from 3. Colorado State also does a nice job not turning the ball over, 9.5 turnovers per game on 38% three-point shooting. Would like to see a little bit more rebounding from 6'8" Patrick Cartier with just 2.5 rebounds per game, but Nikwe Clifford has been able to help alleviate some of that, the Colorado transfer, and then you've got the Black Hills State college transfer in Joel Scott, who has been so versatile as well. 15 points, 7 boards with Clifford. He gives you more in the neighborhood, about 5 to 5.5 rebounds per game. And it's a Colorado State team that they've got really good depth. They're able to go about 9 or so deep with all these guys playing at least 10 minutes per contest. Pretty much all these guys shoot it well from three-point range. Heck, even when you go down the board a little bit more to someone like Joe Palmer, he's able to shoot 40+% from three-point range. So I do think that there should be some domination from Colorado State. For Denver, you've got a nice two-headed monster in Tanemo along with Tommy Bruner, but in a step-up game. I think that they're going to have a tough time with it. And again, just because of the amount of possessions that these two teams play on an average basis, I just don't think that you get over this total. Did set my total more around at 154, diving in on the under end with Colorado State. Made them 24-point favorites. So want to lay the number and going to be taking a look at this total under 747, 748 on the betting board. It is Washington State. They play UC Riverside. Riverside finds themselves as an underdog of between 13.5 to 14.5 points. Totals between 135 to 135.5. And with UC Riverside, I did set them as a underdog of 16.5 points. So I'm going to be willing to lay it with Washington State. This is a Cougars bunch that has been in quite a bit of transition. They lose 4 of their top 5 scores from a season ago, but we have seen the gentleman from North Macedonia be able to really step up, as you've had Andrei Yagmovsky do a really nice job with his versatility at right around 6'9", 11.5 points, 5.5 boards, a block, a steal per game while shooting 36% from three-point range for a Washington State team that, once again, very slow, very controlled, but they're doing a nice job being able to just take care of the ball with about 10.5 turnovers per game, and they play against a Riverside team that's not going to be looking to push tempo as well. 313th of the country is this Riverside team in terms of total possessions per game. Washington State more around 240th, and right now this team is feeling like Moses, as they've been able to get about 12.5 points per game out of Isaiah Moses. 4 assists per game, has come up from the non-D1 level and is shooting 39.5% from three-point range. That's been big for a Riverside team that's been wondering what they would be able to do in life without Zion pulling it. They've also been able to get right around 4.7 assists per game out of Barrington Hargress as well. This is a Riverside team that's not really going to light you up from three-point range, but they do the little things well under Mike Magpayo. They are only turning the ball over about 10 times per contest, so that is something that you do like to see from them. But this is a Washington State team that they do really like to go from the outside and bomb it from three, and UC Riverside, they're 351st in the country in opponents' three-point shooting percentage. That's really where it's going to go wrong. Meanwhile, Washington State, they're 31st in the country in opponents' three-point shooting percentage. Washington State is really winning games from the perimeter. They're getting just enough rebounding out of Isaac Jones, who comes in from Idaho, 15 points, 8 boards per contest. Meanwhile, you've got Riverside without a single guy that's giving you north of 5 rebounds per game. Kyle Owens, who's more of a 6'8" wing player. He's not necessarily a guy that's lauded for his rebounding. He's 4.7 rebounds per game. It's leading the way. I think that Washington State going to be able to out-physical UC Riverside. I do think that this is going to be a slow and controlled game, and I think Riverside just loses this game from the outside. I did set my total at 134.5. I do like what I've been seeing out of this Washington State defense, and I do think that with this Riverside team, they're going to be able to do just enough to be able to keep this game relatively slow and to prevent a further blow-up. But that said, I do think the Washington State going to be able to get the job done in this ordeal. Willing to lay up to 16 with them and set my total at 134.5. So also diving in on the under 749, 750 on the betting board. SMU, it's a road face-off against Arizona State. Arizona State is a 3 to a 3.5 point favorite, and your total's between 140 and 140.5. And with Arizona State, made them a favorite of 5.5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay this number with SMU. You've been able to get some good three-point shooting out of Chuck Harris. Chuck Harris comes in for Butler. He's been able to shoot in the high 30s from three-point range. Well, darn near everyone else on the roster shooting right around 30% or lower from distance. But for Arizona State, certainly it's been a slog with regards to their offense, but you've been able to see a little bit more recently on the backcourt duo of Jose Perez, Frankie Collins. Keep in mind, Jose Perez did not commit to Arizona until about 3 weeks before the start of the season. He was over at West Virginia. He was pretty much academically ineligible, and he landed on going to become a Sun Devil. And for he and Frankie Collins, combined about 25 points, 11 rebounds, 5.5 assists per game, and for a team with a bunch of moving parts, they haven't done a bad job of taking care of the ball with about 11 turnovers per game. Frankie Collins by himself is able to get about 3.5 steals per game, but the team shoots just 28.5% from three-point range, and just with the roster that they have, I don't think that's going to be getting much more positive moving forward. Jose Perez has never really been a guy that lights it up from three-point range. It is an Arizona State team that overall is about 35th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis, and considering the butt-kicking that they took at the hands of BYU, that's actually really impressive. Meanwhile, you got a SMU team that it just feels like they have not found their identity yet. They're a 24th team in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but you really don't have a single guy that gives you north of about 5.5 rebounds per game. Tariq Smith, Samuel Williamson, they're both giving you about 5.5 rebounds per game. Tariq Phelps has been one of your main floor generals, 2.5 assists. He's able to chip in their 15 points per game for an SMU team that they do shoot about 34.5% from three-point range, but it just feels like they're sort of rhymeless and rhythmless. They played against Wisconsin Wisconsin and West Virginia, but they really haven't been too battle-tested to this point. It's an SMU bunch as well, and it's really not broken the 70-point plateau against legitimate competition, 70 points or less in each of their last 5 games. Meanwhile, for this Arizona State team, sans that game against BYU where they got completely lit up, Arizona State has really not allowed north of 71 points in any game thus far this season. So I do think that Arizona State going to be able to do a good job on the defensive side of things. I do think that it's going to be a slog for both of these teams. I did set my total at 135.5. As a result, I'm going to be taking a look at the under of the Arizona State. I do think that the backcourt is starting to come along, so going to be one to lay up to 5.5 points with Arizona State. Set them as 5.5 point favorite and diving in on the under. 751, 752 on the betting board. It is Cal Baptist. They play us to Utah Tech. Utah Tech finds themselves as a underdog of 8.5 points, and your total on this game, it is 138.5. And with Utah Tech, I did set them as an underdog of 8.5 points. So here at an 8, I'm going to be one to lay it. I'm seeing mostly 8s, a few 8.5s out there as well. This actually opened up at 7.5, but with that said, for this Utah Tech team, I think what is going to be very difficult for them is just being able to overcome the fact that they just lost so much in the backcourt from a season ago. They bring back Tanner Christensen, who he's able to light it up from 3-point range a little bit as a guy with size at right around 6'9", 6'10", but you do take a look at this Cal Baptist team, and they're really slowing things down to a crawl. They're a bottom 30 team in terms of total possessions per game, but they've been able to get good efficiency with their backcourt duo, Blondo Chiquinho, along with Dominique Daniels, being able to combine for a little bit over 28.5 points per game. Both are shooting north of 40% from 3-point range. You do want to see Cal Baptist perhaps be a little bit more aggressive on the defensive side of things, generating just 4.4 steals per game, but Hunter Goodrick is going to be by far the best rebounder in this game, 9 points, but 11 boards per contest, and at 6'7" a season ago, he shot 46% from 3-point range. This is a Utah Tech team that has been just getting gashed on the defensive side of things ever since coming up from the D2 level about 3 or so years ago. For Utah Tech, they're about 160th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, so it's been a little bit marked improvement, but still about 225th in the country in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. Cal Baptist is really looking to hurt you from the outside, and coupled with that, with Utah Tech really looking for that main point guard as well. They're turning the ball over 15 times per contest as a team that plays a little bit more up-tempo, but not a team that plays so up-tempo that they should be having that sort of just a turnover discrepancy. You've been able to get really good shooting out of Beon Riley. He's been able to give you 11.5 points, comes in from Hawaii, and is currently shooting 55.5% from 3. Caution, he shoots for his career about 26% from distance, so I certainly do think that there's going to be a little bit of a fall off there. And for this Utah Tech team, because they lost so much from a season ago, just have to run with a 6-man rotation, and when you play a little bit more up-tempo, that typically leads to a little bit more doomsday, and I do think the Cal Baptist going to do a good job getting this game played under their circumstances and sort of under their tempo, so I do think that it is going to be tough for Utah Tech to be able to overcome that, and I do think that they lose the battle on the glass. So I did set Cal Baptist as an 8.5 point favorite here, and it ain't going to be one to lay it in. Totals between 137.5 to 138.5. I set mine at a 138.5, so mostly seeing 138, going to be looking at the over and going to be one to lay with Cal Baptist. And this is the last game on the normal Las Vegas betting board before we hit the extra game, 753, 754. It is Cal State Fullerton. They throw it face off against Pepperdine. The Waves of Pepperdine do find themselves as a favorite of between 2.5 and 3 points, and your total sending between 143 and 144. I set Pepperdine as a favorite of 8 points, so I'm going to be one to lay the number with Fullerton. This just isn't the same team that we saw the last few years. You've got Max Jones, who's able to do a nice job from the outside. He's 6'4", 6'5" last year, was a very good 3-point shooter, and he's had to become the man thus far this season. 17.5 points, 3.5 boards, shooting about 34% from 3-point range, but with Fullerton, you just like to see a little bit more down low for the team, as Grayson Carper right now is logging 5.5 rebounds per game, and he is the only guy in the roster that gives you north of 4.5 rebounds per game. Vincent Lee has been in the fold for this team for many, many years. Feels like he's been in college basketball for forever, but he just hasn't been able to ascend. 9.5 points, 3.5 rebounds per game. We're just expecting a little bit more there, and for Fullerton, this is not an up-tempo team, and yet they turn the ball over 15 times per game. Now, with Pepperdine, this team has been one of the lesser teams in terms of their defense, really ever since the current regime has taken hold, but that said, with this Pepperdine team under Lorenzo Romar, even though they are ghastly with their opponent's 3-point shooting percentage being 322nd in the country, I do think that they're going to be able to hold up in this ordeal. They've been able to do a relatively solid job down low, even with Michael Porter's brother in Javon Porter being out. I have no idea where he is, by the way, but he hasn't played all season. But Michael Ajay, who came up from the D2 ranks, has been a nice find. 18 points, 10.5 boards on 52% 3-point shooting. Houston Mallet has been really one of your primary outside shooters as well, making 48% of his threes with 18 points per game. Pepperdine, they do get a little bit out of sorts. They turn the ball over 13 times per game, but unlike Fullerton, who's a relatively slow and controlled team, this is a Pepperdine team that they do look to push tempo. They're a little bit slower this year than they have been in past past years, but still 140th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. You're still trying to figure out what you're able to get out of Ethan Anderson. Still remember as a freshman 4 seasons ago over at USC, he was logging north of 4 assists per game. He has seen a fall off pretty much in every year that he's been in college basketball, but you've been able to get a little bit more contributions out of some of the ancillary pieces like Jair Petrie, Alon Niels, Cooper. These are guys that are combining for about 12 points per contest. It's a Pepperdine team that overall is shooting about 36.5% from three-point range. I do think that Pepperdine going to be able to win from within with the Fullerton team that is very much top-heavy with Max Jones and Dominic Bruton being the only guys in the backcourt that are able to deliver production. So it is a spot where I set Pepperdine as an 8-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number in. I did make my total a 146 as well. I do think that Pepperdine going to be getting things cranked up tempo a little bit more, and I do think that their opportunities in terms of second chances on the glass going to lead to some points. So going to be taking a look at the over, and I'm going to be willing to lay with Pepperdine. Now we hit the extra games.
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra games today, so we go into the bonus.
306, 529, 306, 530. UMBC is on the road facing off against Morgan State. Morgan State is between a 2.5 to a 4-point underdog with your total between 166.5 and 168. And with Morgan State, I did set them as a favorite of 1.5 points. I'm going to be taking them outright on the money line. We saw UMBC remarkably give up 89 points in a game against Coppin State last week. That's just impossible to do, and Morgan State has some upside with having Winston Tabbs, who I remember when he was over at Boston College many years ago. He was about a 13-point per game scorer. This guy has upside. He was just robbed by injuries last few seasons. Now, they are dealing with a little bit of an injury to Miles Thompson. He was a starter 2 seasons ago over at St. Francis before, ironically enough, injuries costed him pretty much the entirety of last season, but Cameron Hobbs, he still is able to shoot about 40% from three-point range, logging 10 points, 3 assists per game for a Morgan State that plays super duper up tempo. Now, with UMBC, they play at warp speed as well, and you've been able to have Deion Brown be Mr. Do-It-All for the team, 16 points, 2.5 assists, 5.5 rebounds per game, a steal and a half per contest, but he is literally leading the team in every category except for blocks. Max Lloyd, I think that he's going to need to step up a little bit more, comes in from Penn. He's been able to give you about 4 boards, a little bit over a block per contest, and right now, other than Deion Brown, despite the fact that this team plays at warp speed, he is the only guy that's giving you north of 4.6 rebounds per game. That is a big, giant issue for this team. You've been able to get some good three-point shooting with 46% out of Devin Sapp as UMBC as a whole. They're shooting 35% from the outside, but the 14 turnovers per game, I do think is going to be a little bit costly against a Morgan State team that does a bit of a better job of being able to generate turnovers than this UMBC bunch. With UMBC, they really don't play a lot of defense, but it is a Morgan State team that's trying to find themselves as well. So I do think that it's a very interesting ordeal with Morgan State in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Certainly, they've been getting gashed at 356. You got UMBC more on 256, but I do think that the upside that Morgan State presents, it is there, and with them being out there on the home floor, I like Morgan State getting the job done, and I did set my total at a 165.5. I do think that both of these teams are going to see a little bit of coolage from three-point range, and both of these teams do turn the ball over north of 14 times per game, which will rob them of a few possessions. So going to be diving in on the under, and Morgan State outright on the money line. 306, 531, 306, 532. Loyola Maryland, it's a road face-off against LaSalle. The Explorers are exploring a cover at 7.5 to 11-point favorites. Your total is between 143.5 and 144. I did set my total at a 143.5. Currently seeing that 144.5 out there. I'm going to be taking a look at the under, but with LaSalle, I did set them as a 13.5-point favorite. With Loyola Maryland, they've had such a tough time taking care of the ball, north of 13 turnovers per game. Was expecting a little bit more out of this backcourt after you were having a little bit of a hot three-point shooting start to the season for Loyola Maryland. It has really come back down to earth. They're shooting about 32% from three-point range as a collective. D'Angelo Steins, the Old Dominion transfer, he started out the year first 5 games shooting well north of 40% for 3. He's back down to 30%. Deion Perry is able to give you 4 assists, but he's also turned the ball over 3 times per contest, and Golden DK is able to do some nice things down low, about 8 rebounds per game, but he's a true low post presence, and you need Alonzo Fourier, who's been a little bit more of a stretch player. He will give you a block, 5.5 rebounds per game to take a little bit more hold of the offense, but I think that they're going to have a tough time against a LaSalle team that is starting to find a little bit more down low. With Rokas Josias, who comes over from Lithuania, being able to log about 6.5 rebounds per game, and LaSalle just flat out has a better backcourt. Jamari Breakus along Keon Brantley being able to combine for about 35.5 points per game. Both of these guys give you at least 3.5 assists per game apiece. As a matter of fact, they combine for a little bit over 8 assists to 3.5 turnovers per game, while Breakus shooting 46% from three-point range, and then just having that glue guy in Anwar Gill just stuffs Sasachi. 4 boards, 4 assists, 13 points, a little bit over a steal per game. That is big for a LaSalle team that they go about 7 deep. They don't necessarily have the world's most depth, but been able to also get 46% three-point shooting out of Andres Marrero. It feels like LaSalle has been just really well coached in general under Frank Dunphy. They're doing the little things right, turning the ball over only about 10.5 times per game. They're not necessarily forcing a bunch of turnovers, but you've got a Loyola Maryland team that's just been stuck with their offense in regulation. 70 points or fewer in 4 of their last 5 games. And for LaSalle, they look much faster than what they are in terms of total possessions because they played 4 overtime sessions in their last 2 games. So I do think that things might be dying down a little bit more. Here at the 144.5, going to be diving in on the under, but with LaSalle, 1 to lay it to 13 with them. 306, 533, 306, 534. It is Stony Brook, and they play us at Stone Hill. Stone Hill finds themselves as an underdog between 10 and 10.5 points. Your totals between 143.5 and 144.5. With Stony Brook, I did set them as a favorite of 12 points. I'm going to be 1 to lay this number with Stone Hill. You just don't have any sort of rebounding whatsoever with this team. There is not a single guy on the roster that has been able to give you north of 5 rebounds per game. You do have a little bit of versatility in that you've been able to get some 3-point shooting out of Max Zagorowski, who's been able to give you about 12 to 13 points per contest. So love what he's been able to bring to the table. But for the Stony Brook team, they were dealing with so many injuries last season that it's just nice that they now have Dean Knoll back in the fold, who was over at Cornell to begin his career. He's able to give you a few assists per game. Aaron Clark, when he was over at Sacred Heart 2 seasons ago with a 15-plus point per game score. And then you're able to pair that up with someone like a Keenan Fitzmaurice, who he's never been like some sort of an amazing 3-point shooter or anything like that, but at 7 feet tall, he does make the opponents just respect the fact that he is able to pop it from 3-point range. And then with Stone Hill, Tony Felder, who comes over from VMI, he's been able to give you an assist-to-turnover ratio of 2. He's been able to pump it there about 12.5 points per game, but just need more down low out of Pano Paulo Divas, who's been able to give you about 4.8 rebounds, 6.5 points per game. And for Stone Hill, got a team that doesn't have anyone that gives you north of 5 rebounds per game. You're turning the ball over 14 times per game, shooting less than 40% from the floor. Fully recognize that this is not a Stony Brook team that is necessarily going to be one of those like top 10 teams in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis or anything like that, but it sure is better than what we're getting out of Stone Hill. Stone Hill, 352nd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Stony Brook, more around 260th, and with Stony Brook just having a little bit more overall depth. Even someone like a Toby Okanowu, who's able to give you 7 points per game last year, shot in the mid-30s from 3-point range, and with Stony Brook only turning the ball for 10.5 times per game compared to Stone Hill's 14. I think that that's going to be a big difference in this one. Did set Stony Brook as a 12-point favorite as a result, so want to lay the 10 to 10.5, and did set my total at 144. Here at a 144.5, it is going to be my buy point on the under to go along with Stony Brook's. 306, 535, 306, 536. UCF, Central Florida, plays us at Jacksonville. Jacksonville, a 14 to a 15-point underdog. Totals between 143.5 and 144. That's at my total 135.5. Going in on the under. Now, it's Central Florida. They are currently a top 40 team in terms of possessions per game. Last year, they were a much more slow and controlled team, and I do think that they are going to be tapering back a little bit in terms of their overall tempo. So I'm going to be diving in on the under. You've got a Jacksonville team that ever since this current coaching regime under Mincy and company take it over, they have been one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball. And for Jacksonville, they are both generating a lot of turnovers and they're turning the ball over a lot themselves. 14.4 turnovers per game while they're getting about 9 steals per contest, but they run into a Central Florida team that they themselves are taking the ball away about 9 times per game. You've got Jalen Sellers and Darius Johnson, your 2 top scorers, combining for about 3.5 steals per game. Johnson, not a guy that's going to light it up from 3-point range, but is giving you about 14.5 points per game. And Sellers, last season at Ball State, shot about 45.5% from 3-point range, and he has just gotten off to a rough start from 3-point range as far this season, shooting only about 27% from the outside. I do think that there's going to be a little bit of 3-point shooting positivity coming in, but with the Central Florida team as well, each of your top 4 scorers give you at least 4 rebounds per game. I think that that'll be big in being able to just neutralize what Jacksonville is able to do. Jacksonville typically prides themselves on being able to do a nice job down low with the likes of Bryce Workman being able to give you 8 rebounds per game, but Abrima Diallo, who comes over from San Jose State, 7 boards per contest, a little bit of an eraser in terms of shot blocking as well. I do think that things are going to be a little bit more sloppy in this one, as we have seen Jacksonville really start to taper back with regards to their tempo. And with the Jacksonville team, it's been all over the place for them. In their last 4 games, the defense has allowed 65, 90, 48, and 79 points. So they really do just go with the flow. Meanwhile, it's a Central Florida team that they themselves on defense have held 3 of their last 5 opponents to less than 65 points in regulation as well. So I do think that for Central Florida, we're going to see the defense step up a little bit, but I think that that this number has gotten a little bit too lofty. Robert McRae has been a nice primary scorer for Jacksonville, shooting 40% from three, 19.5 points per game coming in from Wake Forest. And with Central Florida, just with the questionable three-point shooting that they've had thus far this season, I think that this number has gotten a little bit too lofty. Semi-total 135.5 diving in on the under end with Jacksonville. Set them as a 13.5-point underdog, so taking 14 plus with them. 3 of 6, 537, 3 of 6, 538. St. Joe's hopes to not be average Joe's. They play host to American. American is a 14.5 to a 15-point underdog, and your total on this game is saying between 142 and 143. And with American, I did set them as an underdog of 12 points. I'm going to be willing to take them with St. Joe's. Certainly, they get built up with that massive win that they have over Villanova. And keep in mind as well, it wasn't a win, but they did take Kentucky to overtime on the road. So this is a very battle-tested team, but for this American bunch, they were very efficient with their three-point shooting a season ago. The problem was they were turning the ball over about 14 times per game. This year, they're only turning the ball over about 11 times per game with Elijah Smalls doing a nice job shipping in their 5+ assists per game. This team has done a very good job of being able to alleviate their turnovers, and you do have a St. Joe's team that can be a little bit top-heavy. You've got to love what you've been able to get out of Eric Reynolds, 16.5 points, 3 assists, shooting 43% from three for a team that as a whole shoots about 36% from the outside. You've been able to get a lot down low in the freshman from Paris, France, and Christ Edesanko. He's been able to give you about 6.5 rebounds per game, and then your main rebounder has actually been Rasheer Fleming. 12 points, 7 rebounds, has come in after last season. He was really a little bit of a off the bench, sort of sixth man sort of guy that was sort of in and out of the fold in terms of the starting lineup, and now he's been a nice little rim protector for the team with a block and a half per contest. But I do think that Matt Rogers is going to be able to hold up in this game. 6'9" combo player that last year shot 40% from three, this year 37.5% from distance, 16 points, 7 boards. He is hurt by the fact that Johnny O'Neal is unable to form sort of a Twin Towers combo, much like a season ago. But for American, they have bumped up their tempo. They're still shooting about 35.5% from three-point range, and we've been able to get a lot of production with regards to the backcourt, especially with having Mr. Jeff Sprouse, Jeff with a G, be able to give you about 36.5% three-point shooting in double figures as well. So I do think that American is going to be able to hold in there, and I do think that American starting to play some more up-tempo games, and I think that their just overall roster is going to allow for it. You've got an American bunch that has gone to at least 68 points in each of their last 5 games. This is a St. Joe's team that they themselves have been pretty rock solid on offense recently, scoring at least 74 in 3 out of their last 4 games. So going to be taking a look at the over. Set my total 144, and we'll take the points with Americans. Set them as a 12-point dog. 306, 539, 306, 540. Boston U is going to be playing us in Maine. Maine hopes to not get Maine with between 1 and 2 points, with them laying it 127 to 128.5 is the total, and with Maine, I set them as a 6.5-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay this number. Got a Boston U team that's just completely brand new from a season ago. They lose each of their top 5 scorers. Miles Brewster with his 9 points, 3.3 assists per contest. He needs to be in Mr. Do-It-All mode. And for Boston U, you don't have a single guy that's able to give you north of 5 rebounds per game. So Peter Filipovsky, who's been able to do a nice job with about 6.5 rebounds per game for Maine, should be able to take over. And for Maine, they've got the leader in steals per contest from a season ago in Kellen Tynes. He has seen a little bit of drop off there last year, 3.3 steals per game. He's getting just 2 thus far this season, but each out of your top 5 scorers for Maine, at least 1.3 steals per game. They have to deal with a little bit of an injury to A.J. Lopez, but been able to get about 45.5% three-point shooting. Jashante Wright-McLeish, who's been able to chip in there about 9 points per game, along with that good three-point shooting. And it's a Maine team as a whole. They're only shooting about 31% from three-point range, but being able to generate those steals against a Boston U team that's just brand new in the backcourt. They're only turning the ball over about 12 times per game, but with this Boston U team, that's not necessarily too great considering they are one of the more slow-tempo teams in all of college basketball. They're going up against a Maine team that is very slow, very deliberate with their offense as well. Maine is 342nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game, so they should be able to control the tempo in this one. And with Boston U literally not having a single guy averaging north of 9.1 points per game, they're shooting 39.5% from the floor. They're just completely out of sorts. They're looking right now to Malcolm Chamaisi, who's been able to give you about 5.5 rebounds per game to control things down low. And though Maine doesn't have a ton of size, they have more size than Boston U, a team that just is looking for an identity at this point. So I did set my total at a 126.5. You're at a 127 to a 128. Going to be diving in on the under. I think that Maine is going to be able to force turnovers and completely control this game. Willing to lay the small number with Maine and taking a look at the under. 306, 541, 306, 542. Presbyterian plays us to Florida A&M. A&M is an 8 to an 8.5 point underdog with your total between 137 and 138.5. And with Florida A&M, I did set them as an underdog of 13 points. I'm going to be willing to lay it with Presbyterian. Fully recognize that Presbyterian, not quite the team that we saw night number 1 when they were able to knock off Vanderbilt, and we have realized that Vanderbilt, not necessarily a great team this far this season, but for Florida A&M, it's just really tough to be able to back a team that, in general, they've got just so many holes on this team. You've had Keith Lamar step up as a primary scorer for this team, 15 points, 6 half boards. That's been very nice to see, but for Florida A&M, you've got a team that shoots as a whole about 27.5% from 3. Lamar is the only guy that's giving you north of 4.4 rebounds per game, and you've got a Presbyterian bunch that, while they aren't necessarily super strong down low, you do have a backcourt in Marquise Barnett, along with Samaje Teal, who have been able to combine for 27 points, with Teal shooting currently 53% from 3. Certainly going to see a little bit of a fall off there, but it's a Presbyterian team that should be able to control this game. They're turning the ball over a little bit less than Florida A&M. For Florida A&M, give them a little bit of credit for holding in there on their home floor against Oregon a few weeks ago, but for Presbyterian, this team has been able to do a relatively okay job with their defense. 155th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're giving up 6.4 points fewer per 100 possessions than they did a season ago. Meanwhile, you've got a Florida A&M team that's currently 358th with this regard, and I do think that for Presbyterian, certainly this is not a team that's necessarily going to be able to take full advantage of that, but I do think that for Presbyterian, with them being able to win the battle down low, with Florida A&M really looking for any sort of facilitation whatsoever, they've been in need of a point guard for many years. They once again don't have anyone that's giving you north of about 3 to 3.5 assists per game. That Presbyterian going to be able to control this game. Set Presbyterian as a 13-point favorite, going to be willing to lay this number, and set by total at 135, so going under and willing to lay it with the Blue Hosts. 306-543, 306-544. Fordham is going to be playing us to NJIT. NJIT finds themselves as underdogs between 16 to 17 points, with your total between 141 and 142, and with NJIT, I did set them as a underdog of 18.5 points. So going to be one to lay it with Fordham. Fordham has been a bit all over the place, especially with their backcourt. They've had the UTSA transfer in Jasaf Metter have to become Mr. Do-It-All for the team. And to his credit, he's been able to do a relatively solid job of stepping up in that bigger role. He's been logging about 13 points, 3 assists. When he was over at UTSA a season ago, was a high 30s three-point shooter, and he's been able to duplicate a lot of that this season. You've got also Abdul Sambilia, who's been able to do a very solid job with about 8.5 rebounds, multiple blocks per game down low thus far this season, and I just think that they completely outgun an NJIT team that they're just dealing with so many moving parts right now. They had to can their coach in the offseason. Adam Hess has been able to give you double figures, but for this NJIT team, they are pretty much the exact opposite of Fordham. Fordham is looking to play up-tempo, but play tenacious defense. NJIT is playing a little bit more slow and a little bit more controlled, as for NJIT, they just have not been able to get anything going on the defensive end as well. 328th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Meanwhile, for Fordham, even with having some of their doldrums thus far this season, it is still a squad that ranks 21st in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Sebastian Robinson for NJIT has been able to give you about 11 points per contest, but for NJIT, it's a not up-tempo team that is turning the ball over 14 times per game, while Fordham has had a few turnover woes themselves. They're able to generate about 9.5 steals per game, and it is a Fordham team that still has given up 61 points or fewer in 3 of their last 5 games. Meanwhile, you've got an NJIT team that has scored 68 points or fewer in each of their last 3. So I do think that Fordham going to be able to control this game. I do think that this is going to be a little bit more of a defensive slobber knocker with the way that Fordham has been so efficient on that side of it. So set by total 140.5, diving in on the under and willing to lay up to 18 with Fordham. 306-545, 306-546. Siena is playing us to Bryan. Bryan is a 7.5 to an 8.5 point road favorite. Totals between 138.5 and 139 with Bryan. Set them as a favorite of 7 points. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Siena now. I mean, it's just been rough for Siena on the injury front, with them having Michael Ely, their top scorer, be out for much of the entirety of the season. It looked like he re-aggravated an injury over the weekend, but the good news is Zach Duquesne, he is back for this team, and he's been one of their primary ball handlers, being able to log about 13 points, 3 assists, 2 steals per contest, and he's not necessarily going to be the world's greatest shooter in the world. He's only been a career about 27% three-point shooter, but you do have a few guys on the roster that have been able to elevate a little bit. You got 6'4" Michael Evbraru, hopefully I said that correctly, gentleman that comes in from Canada. He's been able to shoot about 33.5% from 3. He's come on strong with 8+ points in 4 of the team's last 5 games, and for Siena, they have a transfer that comes in from Sam Houston State and Giovanni Amaruju, who's been able to do a nice job being able to log about 5 rebounds per game. Meanwhile, you've got on the flip side a Bryan team that has been expanding the rotation a little bit ever since Jared Grasso was let go and they turned over the reins to Phil Martelli Jr. This team has been seeing a few more minutes out of these guys like Doug Eater, Connor Withers. They bring in a lot of guys via the transfer portal, and I was always wondering why these guys weren't seeing any minutes, but it is all about Sharif Gross-Bullock along with Earl Timberlake and their versatility. Timberlake is bringing sexy back, 4.5 assists, 11.5 points per game, while Gross-Bullock gives you 37.5% three-point shooting with 18 points per game, while Rafael Pinzon, who comes in from St. John's, he's been a 43.5% three-point shooter, so love what he's been able to bring to the table, but it is a little bit of a one-dimensional Bryant team, and it is a Bryant team that is really slowing down as well. This is a Bryant team that traditionally they're a top 30 team in terms of total possessions per game, and the credit needs to go where it is due with Bryant's defense. They're back in the top 100 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis after it was quite ghastly the last few seasons, but I do think that Siena is going to be able to do a relatively solid job down low. This is not a Bryant team that necessarily has a lot of size, and with Tiken back in the fold at the point guard spot, I think that it allows Siena to hold in there as a home underdog. I set my line at 7, so I'm going to be one to take the points with Siena. I did set my total at a 141 as well. Siena, they're a bad shooting team. Currently, they're shooting 25.5% from three-point range. Should see some positivity with that. So taking a look at the over, and we're going to be taking a look at the points with Siena. 306-547, 306-548. St. John's is going to be playing us to Sacred Heart. Sacred Heart is a underdog between 20 to 21 points, and your total that is anywhere between 157.5 to 159. Set my line at 18. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Sacred Heart. Sacred Heart, I think, has a real chance of being able to win the NEC this season, and they've got good versatility as you've been able to have Tanner Thomas and Nico Galletti really headline this team. They're combining for about 26 points per contest, just under 13 rebounds, 3.7 steals between the two of them, with Thomas at 6'6", shooting 48.5% from three. Galletti right around 6'6", shoots about 35.5% from the outside. Now, with the Sacred Heart team, your big question mark is this team going to be able to deliver on the defensive side of things? As in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, they are right around 143rd, which is just a hair better than they were a season ago. Going up against the St. John's team that you got Joel Soriano, who last year was able to log a double-double, but for St. John's, they've been a little bit out of sorts with their defense as well, about 175th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They did challenge themselves in terms of their multi-team event, and Dennis Jenkins has done a nice job at the point guard spot of giving out 5.5 assists per game, but this is a St. John's team that is playing very quickly, and it's led to them having some sloppy play, 13 turnovers per game. It is a bunch as a whole. It's shooting about 36.5% from three-point range, but you tell that there's a lot of guys that are taking on lesser roles that aren't necessarily comfortable with it. Jordan Dingle is giving you about 11 points, shooting in the mid-30s from three-point range, but doesn't feel like he's as effective as he has been the last few seasons. Now, the good news is they get back RJ Louise. He was able to make his debut against Holy Cross a few days ago. Last year, he was logging about 11.5 points on 35% three-point shooting while he was over at UMass, but this is a Sacred Heart team that also in their backcourt, they've got Raheem Solomon along with Aiden Carpenter, a pair of guys that began their career in the Metro Atlantic. Their combined shoot about 33% from three, about 16.5 points per game, so you've got some good shooting options there with a Sacred Heart team that plays a little bit more up-tempo while turning the ball over just 12.5 times per game. Now, Sacred Heart coming in on a rough patch, having losses to St. Joe's, New Hampshire, and the Boston U loss was really, really bad, but this is a team that is fully capable of igniting. Meanwhile, you've got a St. John's team that they come in having given up at least 73 points in 3 out of their last 4 games, so it's a good old situation of something's got to give. I did set my total out of 154. I do think that for Sacred Heart, they are doing a little bit of a better job on defense than they have in past years, and for St. John's, this is a team that they themselves, with Louise back in the fold and just getting to know each other, I think that they're going to be a little bit more sure-handed on the defensive side of things as well. So diving in on the under, and we'll take anything north of 18 points with Sacred Heart. 306-549, 306-550. NC State is going to be playing us Maryland Eastern Shore. The Shore is a 24 to a 25 point underdog. Totals between 146.5 and 148.5, and with NC State made them a 25.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay this number. NC State has really been doing the little things well. Not a team that's necessarily going to go bulldozer mode from three-point range or anything like that, but they're only turning the ball over 10 times per game. They shoot 76% at the free throw line, and you've got a well-put-together backcourt with DJ Horn, Casey Morcell, along Jaden Taylor, combining for about, I would say, 40.5 points per contest. And then DJ Burns down low, 5 boards, 13.5 points per game. But he's gotten massive help from Mohamed Diarra, because Burns does a very good job on the offensive side of things. Diarra is a little bit more of that glass cleaner. He's able to give you 7 boards per game. Comes in from Missouri, where they just underutilized him in general. Ben Middlebrooks has been able to give you a little bit more on the boards as well. And that's been big for this NC State team in being able to control games. And for Maryland Eastern Shore, last season, this team was a top 5 team in all of college basketball in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. They lose pretty much 4 of their top 5 scorers from the season ago, and As a result, it has caused a defense that was relatively competent to go straight down the toilet bowl. Maryland Eastern Shore about 260th in the country in terms of opponent's 3-point shooting percentage. And then if you look at just the raw points allowed on a per possession basis, 358th. You've got Troy Hupstead, who's been able to give you 8.5 boards, 11 points per game, but you just don't have the same amount of backcourt depth they had a season ago. Chance Davis is really the lone guy that's back, shooting 37% from three. He's able to give you about 11 points per game, but you've only got 3 guys on the roster that are generating about north of 6.4 points per game. Elijah Wilson, who comes in from Toledo, has been able to give you about 6.5 points, and he's been a little bit more effective recently, but has never really been a tremendous 3-point shooter other than Hupstead. You don't have a single guy on the roster as well that gives you north of 4 rebounds per game, so depth is a big time issue with Maryland Eastern Shore. We've just seen them just have really ghastly offensive performances, 62 points or fewer in 4 of their last 5 games. Meanwhile, for NC State, they have been, once again, able to elevate their defense just a little bit in regulation, giving up 72 points or fewer, and now 3 out of their last 5 games, so it is a relatively interesting spot. I did set my total at a 147.5. Right now, I'm seeing 148.5 pop up. I'd be willing to take that under rather than 146.5 over, just because we saw with Maryland Eastern Shore how cold they were against East Carolina. Just don't know if they're going to hold up their end of the bargain. So taking the under with NC State, willing to lay up to 25 with them. 3-6-5-51, 3-6-5-52. Wofford is on the road facing off against Gardner-Webb, and Gardner-Webb finds themselves as a favorite of between 7.5 to 8 points, with your total between 147.5 to 148. And with Gardner-Webb, did set them as a favorite of 6 points. So going to be willing to take the points with Wofford. Now with Wofford, this has been one of the worst defenses in all of college basketball, as they have been for much of the season a bottom 10 team. In terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, it's gotten a little bit better recently. They're up to 323rd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, so not much better, but you know what? It is a little bit better, and when it comes to this Wofford bunch, you do have Corey Tripp, who's been able to do a nice job out there in the backcourt with 15.5 points per contest. He's about a mid-33 point shooter, and do have a little bit of something down low with he being able to give you 6 rebounds per game. Kyler Fiowich, about 10 points, 8 rebounds per game for a Wofford team that does need to cut down on the 13.5 turnovers per game. They've been very unlucky with the way that they lost Jackson Pavelski, lost Ryan Larson in back-to-back years to the transfer portal. Meanwhile, for this Gardner-Webb team, you don't necessarily have that main facilitator for them as well. DQ Nicholas, he's been able to log about 3 assists per game, but it is a Gardner-Webb team that they just don't have a lot of shooting around the perimeter, shooting about 30.5% from 3, and they lost their main 2 shot blockers from a season ago, LaFile Dufiel along with Kareem Reed. These 2 guys were both able to give you north of a block and a half per contest, so that does leave them a little bit more vulnerable down low. They have been able to get right around 6.3 rebounds, 14.5 points per game out of Caleb Robinson, but right now he's the only guy that's really giving you north of 4.5 rebounds per game. Gardner-Webb, still a relatively stout defensive team, but with all these losses, they have not been quite the same thus far this season. 168th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and with Gardner-Webb having just their outside shooting abilities not be great in general, I do think that it's going to cause for a little bit of a rough situation in general. Gardner-Webb had a undergo over because of overtime when they played against Yale, so they've been a little bit unlucky on that front, and Wofford not playing as up-tempo as their raw possessions per game would indicate, as they played 2 of their last 3 games in overtime as well. So this is a spot where I did set my total at a 142. I think that with both of these teams playing overtime sessions, it has warped their numbers a little bit, so I'm going to be diving in on the under with Gardner-Webb willing to play up to 6 with them, with this number getting away from it at right around a 7.5 to 8. Going to be taking the points with Wofford. 3-6-5-53, 3-6-5-54. Northeastern plays us in Vermont, and Vermont is a favorite of between 1.5 to 2.5 points. 138.5 to 140 is your total, and with Vermont, set them as a 5.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay this number with Northeastern. They just don't have the versatility to match up with Matt Verrado. Verrado is someone that stands right around 6'8". He was able last season bury about 40% of his threes, and he's picking up right where he left off a season ago, as he's been able to do a nice job logging 13 points per contest, shooting 37% from 3. Need to see a little bit more rebounding out of him, as you've only got 2 guys on the roster that are currently giving you north of 5.2 rebounds per game. Sam Alamutu has been only able to give you about 5 points, but does a nice job hauling in there about 6.5 rebounds per game. And then Shamir Bogues is a do-it-all guy that comes in from Tarleton State. 2 steals, 12.5 points, 5 boards. That's really what this Vermont defense was missing. Vermont, always a solid team on defense, but they don't force a lot of turnovers. Now they're able to force a few more, while they themselves remain efficient, shooting 38% for 3 with just 5 turnovers per game. And for Northeastern, turning the ball over has been really the bane of their existence. 13 turnovers per game. They bring in Lucas Sakota from Harvard, who was able to log about 10 or so points per game last season for them. He's up to about 12 points per game thus far this season, but with this roster. You've only got one guy that's able to give you north of 5 rebounds per game, Chris Doherty at 6'9". He's able to give you about 11.7 rebounds, but he doesn't have the versatility to match up with someone like a Verrado. You got a little bit of a lack of size in general with this Northeastern team. They're shooting about 34% from three-point range, and I still think that Joe Pridgeon has a lot of upside. Go back to what he did as a freshman at Holy Cross during the 2019-20 season, 17.5 points, 7 boards, was able to shoot about 43% from three, but injuries have just really robbed him, and he's looking to get that back. But for this Northeastern team, with not having a lot down low, with Vermont being as precise as they are in terms of their offense, it's a Vermont team that they are always in the bottom 50 in terms of total possessions per game, but they just flat out execute. Meanwhile, you've got a Northeastern team that is in the bottom 50 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, having allowed 75 plus in each of their last 5 games. I do think that this turns into a little bit of a mismatch. I did set my total at a 135.5. Biggest reason why you've got a Vermont team that has really been able to bear down on defense. They gave up just 65 to Yale, 53 to Dartmouth, and they've given up 65 or fewer in 3 of their last 4 games. So going to be diving in on the under. And with Vermont, one to lay up to 5 with them. 306-555, 306-556. Dartmouth plays host to New Hampshire. New Hampshire a 1 to 1.5 point favorite, and your total on this game is anywhere between 145 to 145.5. And I did set my total at 146. I'm going to be looking at the over. We did see Dartmouth play quite a bit more up tempo last season than they have in the past. I do think that they're going to probably try to taper back a little bit, and it's actually still a very small sample size for the Dartmouth team. They have yet to play their 6th game of the season, but that said, with this New Hampshire team, I do think that they're going to be able to go out and dominate with Clarence O'Daniels last season, averaging a double-double, and once again doing that this year. So as a result, I did set New Hampshire as a 4-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay it with New Hampshire. They've also done a nice job of being able to bring in a little bit of help around Clarence O'Daniel, as well as it just felt like he was having to be Mr. Do-It-All last season, but now he's got much more help in the backcourt, has been able to get a little bit more facilitation with about 5 assists per game out of Ahmad Robinson, who's also been able to chip in their 17 points per contest. New Hampshire is a team that I think is going to see a little bit of a fall off with their 35% three-point shooting, but I mean, they've got each other top 5 scorers shooting at least 35.7% from the outside as of right now. They've been able to generate a little bit over 8 steals per game, and talk about tempo shifts. New Hampshire, typically a slow and controlled team. They're in the top 50 in terms of total possessions per game, and for Dartmouth, I think positivity is coming for their 22.6% three-point shooting, even if it's just a little bit. You've been able to have Brandon Mitchell-Day, along Jaron Johnson, both give you 6 rebounds per game, but it's really been Dušan Nesković who's had to do it all on offense. Currently logging 17.5 points per game at 6'8". He last year shot in the mid-30s from three-point range, shot to about 25% this season. Really the lone guy that's canning threes is Nikolai Dimitrovic, who's been able to give you about 6.5 points, shooting about 44% from three-point range, but he's a little bit of a lower usage guy. Dartmouth does not have necessarily a lot of size on low. They've been turning the ball over 13 times per game, and in general for this Dartmouth team, they've played against a few non-D1 teams, and every time they've played against a team at the Division I level, they just have not gotten it going with their offense. 68 points or fewer in every one of them, but against a New Hampshire team that has really cranked up their tempo, given up at least 71 points in each of their last 5 games, I do think that we're going to see a little bit more scoring. This could be close enough for late game filling as well, so I do like the over at 145, set my total at 146, but with New Hampshire, I think they've got too much down low. One to lay up to 4 with them. 306-557, 306-558. You've got Miami, and they're going to be playing against Long Island, and Long Island is an underdog of 27.5 to 28 points, with your total between 153.5 to 154.5, and with Miami, I did set them as a favorite of 30 points. I'm going to be willing to lay this number. It's a Miami team that certainly has had their ups and downs thus far this season, but going up against a Long Island team that you give a little bit of credit. They've been able to cover a few numbers recently, and as a matter of fact, I believe that they have covered 5 straight games. It depends upon your closing number against Florida International, but they've, at the very minimum, covered at least 4 out of their last 5 games, depending upon that closing number, and you've been able to get a little bit more scoring out of Eric Acker, who's been able to give you about 14 points per contest. It is a Long Island team that shoots about 32.5% from three-point range, but the Miami defense, which typically is a little bit inefficient, it typically does one thing well: generate turnovers. On Long Island, they turn the ball over 16 plus times per contest. Now, Miami is going to see a little bit of drop-off with their 42.5% three-point shooting. It's a really good shooting team. It's darn near impossible to shoot 42.5% from 3 for a season, including Muga Poplar, averaging 17 points, shooting 52.5% from three-point range on volume. He's already taken 38 threes thus far this season in 7 games. That's going to be coming down a little bit, but I love Matthew Cleveland and Nigel Pack playing in tandem in the backcourt. Pack has been able to pack it in with a little bit more facilitation with 4.5 assists, 13.5 points per game, while Cleveland playing out the ball, shooting 47% from the outside, and there's just nobody on Long Island that can match up with No Chad or Mir. 16 points, 9 boards. He's able to also give you about a steal and a half per contest, and for Long Island, that RJ Green be able to give you 7 rebounds per game, but he's the only guy that's really logging north of 4.1 rebounds per game. Got 6'6" Tanner Copa, who's been able to give you about 4 rebounds per game, and you've got the Strickland sons out there because Rod Strickland is coach. He's brought in Ty and Terrell Strickland, and both of these guys have been a little bit up and down this season, with your main guy being Ty, being able to log about 12.5 points per game. Terrell Strickland has been more of the outside shooter at 38% three-point shooting, but with Long Island just unable to take care of the ball, and this Miami team playing very, very efficiently on the offensive side of things, I think that we get a very, very high-scoring game. I set my total at 166. I'm going to be willing to take the over. You've got a Miami team that just year in and year out, typically this team is outside the top 100 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Currently, they're 112th, and with this Long Island team, it's been very, very ghastly with their defense, to say the least. About 220th this season. After last year, they were a bottom 10 team in all of college basketball. Long Island has been a little bit better thus far, but I feel like a little bit of it has been due to the competition as well. So, going to be taking the over. I want to lay it with Miami. 306-559, 306-560. Cobb State is going to be playing us with Wagner. Wagner finds themselves as a favorite of between 5.5 to 6 points, and your total is between 120.5 to 122. Set my total at 123.5. I'm going to be taking a look at the over. It's a Wagner team that is one of the worst teams in all of college basketball in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but they get the gift of playing Coppin State. And Coppin State right now 295th in the country in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. And in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, they're clocking in 269th. This is also a Wagner defense that it's not quite what we've remembered seeing them as. 190th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Typically, this is one of your better mid-major defenses in all of college basketball. And for Wagner, you do have a nice go-to scorer in Melvin Council Jr. He's been able to log about 13.5 points per game. Now with Wagner, they do a nice job of being able to execute on possessions as well. And by that, I mean they don't turn the ball over. 9 turnovers per game now. They're shooting 35.5% from the floor. I do think that there should be a little bit of positivity with them. You can tell that they've really been missing Ramir Moore. Moore was one of their top scorers from a season ago. Has been able to log 9 points per game, but has been out each of the last 4 games. Meanwhile, you've got a Coppin State bunch that they've got one guy that's able to put the ball in the basket, and Justin Winston was actually a starter at St. Bonaventure a few seasons ago. He's been able to give you a steal and a half per contest as well. And for Coppin State, credit where credit is due, they've been able to generate about 8.3 steals per game, but they also turned the ball over 15 times per contest. Now you look at this Wagner team, and they've scored 64 points or fewer in each of their last 5 games, and for Wagner, they have not gotten past 64 against a D1 opponent all season long, and for Coppin State, they've exceeded 65 just once this season as well. But I do think that this is a little bit of a situation of something's got to give, and while Coppin State has had a tough time being able to exceed the 70-point plateau, they've given up at least 70 in all but 2 of their games thus far this season. So I do think that Wagner is going to be able to take full advantage of that. Wagner should be able to win the battle on the glass as well, which is why I did set them as a 9.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay up to 9 with Wagner. I did set my total 123.5, so also looking at the over. 306-561, 306-562. Belmont plays us a Lipscomb. Lipscomb is a 4 to 4.5 point underdog. Totals between 162 to 163.5, and with Belmont, I did set them as a 9.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay it. It's a Belmont team that has been in the bottom 100 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but they still do have a high-flying offense, with Kate Tyson really being one of your main headline scorers, a 6'7" combo player that is actually of relation to Hunter Tyson, and he's done a nice job being able to give the team nice versatility with 18.5 points per game, 4.5 boards on 46.5% three-point shooting. Now, Belmont does need to lessen the turnovers, the 14 turnovers per game. That's a little bit rough. A little bit of that was thrown out of sorts when they had to play against old Arizona, but they get a Lipscomb team that they themselves have their warts on defense. Lipscomb currently 200th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and Lipscomb has yet to get Jacob Onjesevich back in the fold. I don't know if we're going to be seeing him all season long. It's been 10 games, and we have not seen him at all, and as a result, you got a Lipscomb team that has one guy that's averaging north of 4 rebounds per game, and that would be 6'3" Will Pruitt. A nice stat sheet stuff for 10 points, 4.5 boards, 3.5 assists per game. He's been able to pop it from 3 at only about a 30% clip, was significantly better a season ago, but Lipscomb as a whole, they do shoot 38% from 3-point range, and they're going up against a Belmont team that's had a very tough time cutting the 3-point arc, to say the least. Belmont 250th in the country in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. Meanwhile, Lipscomb more around 150th, but for this Belmont team, you do now have Malik Dia down low. Say we give you about 6 rebounds per game. That should be able to give Belmont a little bit of an edge down low. And it does feel like you're getting more out of Keyshawn Davidson after he had a rough start to the season. He's now been able to do a nice job going out 3+ assists to 2 turnovers or fewer in 4 of his last 5 games. He's scored double figures in each of the last 2. You really need him to work in tandem with Jacoby Gillespie, who's been one of the main scorers for the team with 16 points on 38% 3-point shooting. And being able to get that back, I think, is absolutely massive for a Belmont team that now they're riding a 4-game win streak. They've put up at least 77 points in each of their last 5 games. And for Lipscomb, they've been all over the place with their offense in their last 4 games, scoring 61, 85, 82, and 57 points. I do think that this is going to be a drag them out, high-scoring affair. Somebody told 163.5. So you're at a 162 to a 163, looking at the over-end with Belmont. 1 to lay up to 9 with them in this intra-city rivalry. And we wrap things up with 306-563, 306-564. Texas A&M Corpus Christi plays SIU Rio Grande Valley. Grand Valley is a 4.5 to a 5.5 point underdog. Your total is between 153 and 153.5. Set my total at 162. I'm going to be looking at the over as you've got a pair of teams that they just aren't necessarily lighting it up with regards to their defense. Rio Grande Valley, a top 20 team in terms of total possessions per game, actually more like 35th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Last game did slow them down just a little bit, but in terms of their defense, when you're playing that quickly, it's hard to be able to win games when you're 311th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Corpus Christi more in the neighborhood about 240th, but with Corpus Christi, much like they did a season ago, they've been able to generate some turnovers. This is a team that as a whole, they're generating about 10.5 steals per game, been able to get some really nice production on some of the mainstays from the season ago. Deion Wright Ford has been able to give you about 11 points per contest for a team that as a whole, they're only shooting about 30.5% from 3-point range. That's the biggest fall off that we saw from a season ago, but you got Owen Deasy, who's been able to step up in a nice way. 8 points, right around about a steal per contest out of him, and then you've been able to get quite a bit more as well in terms of the 7.5 boards, 7.5 points per game out of Gary Clark as well. Clark was a little bit of an afterthought over at Tarleton State a season ago, and is a guy that at 6'8" is able to pop a few threes, more than what could be said really for UT Rio Grande Valley, a team that has been a mess in terms of taking care of the ball, 14.5 turnovers per game, and they're shooting just 26.5% from 3-point range. You've been able to get about 31.5% 3-point shooting and 5.5 boards, 11.5 points per game out of Hassan Abdul Hakim, who's about 6'8", nice little combo player. And I do think that you're going to get a little bit more moving forward when you get him back. And DeAnthony Tipler Jr. was averaging 9 points per game prior to injury, but him being out of the fold really makes a one-dimensional offense even more one-dimensional. You've been able to get a little bit of rebounding with 9.6 boards out of Dalen Williams as well, who a season ago was able to do a nice job on the boards with about 6.5 boards, 2.5 assists per game. But you can tell how much this offense just really ran last season through Justin Johnson, who had 20-plus points per game. They have not been able to find that primary score. They're having a tough time just doling out the ball in general. And with this UT Rio Grande Valley team, really the only thing that they've been able to do is generate steals. And I do think that this is going to be an up-and-down game where, UT Rio Grande Valley has given up 73-plus points in each of their last 5 games. You've got a Texas A&M Corpus Christi team that they've given up 80-plus in 2 out of their last 3 as well. So I do think that you get yourself a high-flying game with a bunch of scoring where Corpus Christi just has a better 3-point shooting and a little bit more down low to be able to get it done. Set Corpus Christi as a 6-point favorite, one to lay the number in. Semi total 162, so also on the over end. That will wrap things up for the Wednesday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. A big thanks to Mike Randle of FTM Bets for joining me in the last segment. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcast. Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of 2 ways we fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at @unit_D1. Keep in mind, letters EM, maybe it does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review, coming at you guys every single day throughout the college basketball season, and that means I'm coming at you once again tomorrow. Thank you so much for tuning in.